Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to Normal Mac Show, host Rob Norton. Now, I'm doing things a little different today. I'm trying. Tom Foolery told me there's a way to vertically stream on YouTube, so I'm trying to set that up. Now, I'm not streaming vertically on YouTube yet, but the plan is I'm going to try it out. So before we get started with the call-ins, we're going to do a little experimentation and see what we could get going with that. That's sort of the plan, anyways. There's certain questions I have about the ability to stream vertically, and then I have to set up scenes and all of that good stuff, which I think sucks. I wish it would just automatically do it with the stream that you're seeing now. But we'll see. We'll test those stuff out. It won't take long, and we'll do that. But how's it going? I hope you're all having a fantastic day. I am. Slept in a little later than normal, and got my day started here. So last night's stream was fun. We'll talk about that or whatever else people want to talk about. So let me tell you about some more problems I'm having. I remember growing up, my parents would always tell me, like clockwork, you could count. When you have some big event coming up that you're going to spend some money in, that's when things occur in your life that are unexpected expenses. So like, your refrigerator will last 11 years until you're about to go on vacation. You're saving up money and you spend the money to go on that vacation. And then bam, your refrigerator blows up and you're like, geez, where am I going to find the money for that? One of the days that was likely to happen was around Christmas time. It was always, you spend money for Christmas gifts for people. And so you're a little more broke than usual. And then bam, that's when all of a sudden you have unexpected problems. So for me, certainly this month has kicked me in the teeth a little more than I expect. And as someone who's not, I'm not a wealthy OnlyFans performer that's making tons of money. So I'm living sort of paycheck to paycheck. I had the expenses from, unfortunately, having to take my dog Annabelle to the veterinarian and her passing. Then I had to get my car inspected because it broke down on the side of the road and it needed a new alternator, tie rod joint, etc. Yesterday, I'm doing Christmas stuff with my wife, my son, and my parents, and we went to this place called Cranex, which is like an old-fashioned toy store, and they always have a ton of Christmas trees, and Santa Claus is there. So we had a lot of fun doing that sort of stuff, but we spent a decent amount of money, and we're already spent about $1,300 extra expenses that we didn't expect around Christmas. And then we left, and my dad's favorite restaurant's Golden Corral, so we went to this Golden Corral, and I pull in, and as I park, this woman pulls in right behind me, and she's like, "Hey, I just wanted to let you know, your back driver's side tire, it looks like the ball joint's out of it, because if the tires are supposed to look like this, it's looking like this. Like it's bent." So, I gotta get the car in the shop again. So that, who knows what the expenses will be from that. When it rains, it pours when it comes to expenses. I'm incredibly blessed, though. As you can tell, I'm not missing many meals. We'd already spent what we needed to on Christmas, so it's not like, oh my goodness, my kid's not going to have, a good Christmas. I don't think that'll be the case at all. I think he's going to have a tremendous Christmas. So, but I just thought that I would mention it's like, that's what happened to me yesterday. With that sort of stuff. Thanks for the kind comments, everyone. The debate chat of the right. Thank you. Last night sucked. I enjoyed it. I'm feeling great. Thank you for Will Roofter. Did I tell my wife about how I slaughtered her? My wife was like, so we'll talk about the debate last night. We can take call-ins. I don't know if I have the time to fix it myself, but that's not the question. The question is, do I have the ability to fix it for myself? And the answer to that is a resounding no. I am one of the least handy people you'll ever meet. I deserve to be mocked and ridiculed for how bad I am at mechanic type work and handyman type work. So I could have infinite time, and that's not the issue with fixing my car. Jack of Trades thought it was boring. Fair enough. Not everyone's cup of tea. Certainly not debates that I'm seeking to engage in routinely or anything of that nature. But so that's what's going on with the vehicle situation. If you missed the debate last night, it was a debate with an OnlyFans performer that got a little heated. So we'll talk a little about it. We could, if people want to call in and talk about that debate, certainly they'll have the ability to do so. If you're just tuning in, what's wrong with my car? The back tire is doing this, and the woman who noticed it, who was a very good Samaritan, was like, "Hey, there's a problem with your tire." She thinks it's probably a ball joint. Yeah. So that's what I was going to say. My wife, sometimes she watches my streams, sometimes she doesn't. So I go downstairs and she's still up. And I'm like, did you see any of that stream? And she's like, I tuned in for like 30 seconds. And why my screen was like this. Wait, that's not right. Let me show you. She's like, and I was like, why is going on? There must be some sort of technical issue. But there wasn't. The reason I did that was because the OnlyFans performer that I was debating decided to wear a very low-cut shirt and continually get right up in the camera and shake her breasts. And I was like, I don't need that shit. I don't need it. So I slid it so my audience didn't have to see her. I didn't have a more elegant solution to just cropping her out. So I just went, yoink. One OnlyFans model a year, maybe. But that's why my wife was like, oh, I wondered what happened, but that was it. It wasn't, my wife trusts me and, I'll be honest, very unclassy. But look, I'm not going to claim some moral high ground here. I definitely was insulting her. Yeah, she called me an incel first. I didn't give a shit. Didn't care at all. I insulted her because I felt like it. And I think that we should shame that sort of behavior. And like I said, if she would have started crying or something, I would have pulled back. I asked her before the debate. She said she had thick skin. Alex PWF, I have no hard feelings against him, but I really don't give a shit that he thought that derailed the debate. Whatever. I don't care. Don't bring me back on. I don't care. So it didn't bother me in the least bit. But we could talk about that if people want to call in and ask specific questions. The specific topic that we spent the most time talking about was no-fault divorce, but it did get into pornography in general. And basically my take is, as someone who's libertarian adjacent, I think that stuff should be legal. But we should shame it as a culture. That's how I feel. And I thought she made some... Once we got into the meat and potatoes of the differences in our beliefs, I thought her views were bad. She's just like, what's human nature to everyone has conflict in relationships, so the natural human existence is to move on average 7 years. So in other words, the norm would be for marriage to end in divorce. If the average is 70, by the way, I didn't mention this last night, but if the average is 7 years, and I'm heavily focused on children, but there's obvious other problems with it as well. But the context that you're focused on children, imagine what that is. Me and my wife get married. 2 years after being married, we have a kid. And then by the time my kid's 5, that's 7 years of marriage, and we say, okay, we're conflicting with each other, time to move on. Now my child, who's 5, has parents that are split up, and probably we're each entering another relationship. Now, we know that the rates increase of abuse to children from partners that are brought in that aren't the biological parent. So now there's 2 more biological parents. So just from my perspective, I remarry when my daughter is 6 or 7, and then that marriage lasts 7 years? Now my daughter's 13 and I'm getting a second divorce? And that's normal. That's the normal, what we should expect. That's horseshit. To make it clear what my point should have been is that all of her trust me bro the studies, I think you could see at the end of the debate when I actually finally said, let me see one of these studies, that she's full of shit. That she's saying studies say things that they don't say, and the studies she's presenting are terrible anyways, like surveys from Facebook. But let's set all that aside. I say divorce is bad for kids. She says maybe, maybe not. You know what's worse for kids? Conflict in the house between partners. Even if we accept, okay, then that's the thing we should seek to avoid. In what world is conflict between partners more likely? A world where I say the primary focus between partners, between a husband and wife, should be the focus of the well-being of the family unit and the kid, and so they understand mutually that self-sacrifice is important? or a world where we accept culture says, actually, it's normal to have conflict and split up? Which world do you think conflict would be more likely? It would be the latter. Why? Because if you think that it's normal and society just says, yep, that's totally cool, then it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Just like if you were to say, well, it's human nature to want to cheat on your spouse, people will use that as an excuse to cheat on their spouse. And society says, that's okay, it's normal, so we're not shaming that. Shaming is good. Shaming is good. We should shame people that engage in behavior that is bad for society. That's good. That doesn't mean that you say, you're not entitled to live in my community. I never want to see your face again. For example, let's take an issue outside of this. It's legal to drink alcohol. There's no problem with drinking a little alcohol. But if someone's an alcoholic, they may legally have the right to do it. But you should shame them. You should. That doesn't mean you have to be like, F you, blah, 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 all the time. But you should be like, you really have a problem. This isn't cool. It's not cool, man. No, it's not cool. You're not a cool guy because you're going to the bar every day and you're blackout drunk by 4 o'clock. It's not cool that you wake up and you drink booze by yourself. It's not cool that you don't have friends anymore because people can't stand to be around you. It sucks, man. It's not cool. Sorry. And when we don't shame and when we celebrate the worst aspects of society like that, then it encourages those behavior. I don't think that we should make acting like a gangster illegal. You should, as long as you're not being a gangster, you should legally be allowed to act like a gangster and talk like a ill-spoken jackass. But we should say, that's not fucking cool. That's lame as shit. You look like an idiot. What are you doing? Why would you celebrate that sort of culture? And we should do that. Instead, we celebrated it. So what happened? We see more and more of it. In some communities, I've talked to people who are educators, who happen to be black and are educators in inner city, and they're like, you want to know what one of the worst shames is? In a lot of these inner city schools, when you have black students that are kicking ass and working hard, they get shamed. They're shamed for trying to succeed. Oh, stop acting white, bro. That's the sort of shit I'm talking about. So her society of not just let's embrace porn and celebrate it, but let's embrace divorce culture. We may need to make divorces easier to get. Is a self-fulfilling prophecy that will make divorces easier and make conflict more likely. That's what's... Now, there are obviously problems with my worldview as well. In this sense, there are people that are going to be divorced that you totally understand it. A woman who has the shit beat out of her. In a society where we say, oh, anyone that's gone through divorce, we should have a stigma on that. That sucks for that lady. And you don't know that, probably. If you're a member of the community, you just know she's a divorcee. But it's better than the alternative. I'm not saying if you had a divorce, if your parents had a divorce, they're the worst people in the world. That's not what I'm saying. But the default should be we celebrate marriage, we celebrate parents sticking it out and staying together, and we frown upon divorce. I don't necessarily disagree. I have friends that are gay. I like those friends. I don't have a problem with what they're doing, but it shouldn't be viewed as something to be celebrated or something that should be the norm. It's not. Anonymous Coward, thanks for the $5. Says she crashed out the same way with Andrew. Didn't read the study. She used a naturalistic fallacy. It's something she calls out red pill for doing. And I thought it was funny. I did happen to check to see some of the comments were on Alex's channel. And there were people saying that I was like a red pillar. How the fuck am I a red pillar? What? I even said it on my show afterwards. I find that whole, to me, I've never find the idea of like, yeah, man, treat chicks like dirt and get laid as much as possible. And no. I'm not here to give advice on how to do relationships. I got really lucky. I gave my situation last night. Just to rehash, I talked about this a little last night, but I'll just say, the reason I'm in a good relationship is because I got lucky, because I met a tremendous woman. That's it. That's not good advice for other people. Hey, I hope you get lucky. But there are things I do that make it more likely that my marriage is a success. And so does my wife. And those things include understanding that it's a partnership. And now that we're parents, understanding that there are more important things than just our own personal feelings. Our feelings matter, but the feelings of our partner and our kid and the well-being matters as well. And that intuits that you're going to have to make sacrifices. You don't get to do what you want every day. Part of the reason that I can't quit my job and just become a full-time streamer is because I have family obligations. If I was single, all I'd need is enough money to pay. And I'm not, you might think this is crazy. You can find an apartment here for like $300 a month. All of my bills probably would come to $600-700 a month. So I could get a part-time job and then become a full-time streamer, live off ramen noodles, and be totally fine. And I used to have that mindset in life. Now I'm married. Now I have a kid. There's things more important than me. My primary focus in life is being a provider for them. So I don't get to do whatever I want. I don't get to come up here and just say, fuck it, I'm going to play computer games for 8 hours. But that's okay. My value and my happiness and my worth has increased because I'm doing something that literally matters. Providing for my family. My wife's the same way. You think my wife wants to sit around while I go to work for 4 days in a row, 24/7? And watch Paw Patrol 12 hours a day? No, there's probably hobbies and things she'd rather be doing. But she's sacrificing as a good mother. And it makes her happier and better for it in the long run. So that mentality, I think, does help it make it more likely that our relationship will succeed. It might not. We might end in divorce. I might become a shithead and cheat on my wife. I don't know. But this Rob right now will be heavily disappointed in that person. I'm not saying that we do things perfect. I'm not saying that we never fight. We do. But I think at least having that mindset helps us get over conflicts. The other thing that I mentioned that I did was, even before I was married, I surrounded myself with people that are good people, that aren't cool with the idea of cheating on your girlfriend or spouse, that weren't super like, yeah, let's try to get laid as much as possible. And so the temptation's less likely to be there. But somehow that makes me, I'm red-pilled because I said like, yeah, I think we should we shouldn't be celebrating porn culture and divorce culture. It should be legal, but we shouldn't celebrate. I mean, come on. Yeah, we watched a lot of Bluey too. Paw Patrol's just been the one this week. There's a Paw Patrol movie that's on Netflix. There's 2 Paw Patrol movies now. There's the Super Pups or Mighty Pups, which is the second Paw Patrol movie. That's the first movie Hank ever saw in theaters. But then there was one prior to that, and that one's on Netflix, so we've watched that a lot. Have you ever watched Dry Creek Wrangler? No. But, yeah, I would consider myself, I'm not big into the Andrew Tate type shit. Now, in Andrew Tate's defense, I don't watch it. I see a caricature of what I see of a 30-second clip or what people say about Andrew Tate. So it is entirely possible that I have a misrepresented view of who Andrew Tate is. I don't know. That I can't speak to. But in general, what I think that mentality is, it's not something that All right. We're about ready to get into call-ins. 2 things I'm going to do first. Tom Follery told me about the ability to stream vertically, which reaches a different audience. So I'm going to try to do that. I'm going to try to set that up now, and we'll see if that reaches a different audience on YouTube. May totally fail and crash the whole stream. I don't know, so bear with me. But before that, there is a guy who works for the Crucible named Chickenfoot. And I have to give a special shout out to Chickenfoot. He's helped me with a lot of technical issues. This sign behind me for the arena, that was a debate panel show that I used to moderate on The Crucible. And those are the names of all the people that participated on that panel show. Chickenfoot was like a producer and helped me with the technical aspects of the goings-ons of that show. And he's always open to helping me. And I went to bed last night, and I woke up and I checked my Discord for messages, and Chickenfoot sent me a nice little picture inspired by last night's debate performance with the OnlyFans performer. So I'm just going to play a little tune for you, and then we're going to show that picture, and then we're going to come on and I'm going to try to start the vertical stream, and we're going to get to the call-in. So here we go, all right? Let me get the audio set up here. I have to say I'm very, very pleased with this. And I have to play, I can't play the actual song because it'll probably get struck on YouTube. So I'm going to play like the 16-bit version of it, but I hope people get the reference. So here we go. So I do want to give a oh wait, I'm gonna bring back here. I do want to give a thank you, Chickenfoot. I thought that poster was awesome. Also want to give a shout out to the guy who created that song. That is actually, if I show you here, let's see if I can get this to work. I heard this. Conan's my favorite, one of my favorite movies, and it's absolutely one of my favorite soundtracks. Oh boy, I'm having all kinds of trouble here. Bear with me. Tech problems today. There we go. Alrighty. This Savaged Regime, that's basically a Sega Genesis, like 16-bit version of the song. But yeah, check out that guy's channel, Savaged Regime. Cool song. Also, I love this picture, right? With the idea of, look how badass that is. Like Conan, what an absolute awesome character. But just what a great, I would hang that picture on my wall, man. Just some dude ravaging dozens of guys, just crushing them. You know Conan was a movie? uh, yeah, well, the original Conan's a fantastic movie. All right, here we go. We're going to try to start the live stream vertically. I don't know if anyone could check to see if it's working or not, but here we go. We're going to try. What's up, everyone? If you're just tuning in, this is my first vertical live stream, though I am live streaming on other platforms simultaneously right now, including on YouTube, X, Kick, Rumble, and Twitch. So glad to be here. I'm Rob Knorr, if you're finding me for the first time, because this is supposed to reach a different group algorithmically. I consider myself one of the better conservative populist debaters on the platform. Today we're going to do a call-in show. Now, you that are watching vertically streamed, I would recommend for the full experience that you go over to my regular YouTube channel and check out at Normal America with Rob Knorr, the horizontal stream, for lack of a better word, because you'd be able to see all of the cool chats that people are doing on the side and be able to participate in that chat. Right now, my wife is telling me that the picture of Conan the Barbarian that I just showed on screen will not be welcome in the home. So, all right, to my normal audience, we're just going to do the show as normal as possible after that. So here we go. Today is a call-in show. What do I got here? Message request. Let's check that out. Accept DM. It's funny. So here's how this works. We try to do a call-in show every Friday. It is up to the audience what they want to talk about. I prefer arguing with people, particularly people on the left, but that's okay. We can talk about things we agree about or whatever. Only rules are as follows. One, it's my show, so I'll probably talk more than you. It's similar to calling into a radio show. If you want to set up a full-fledged debate where there's sort of equal amounts of times and we're on an equal platform, I'd be more than happy to do that in 99 out of 100 cases. Secondly, I'm not trying to be rude if I cut you off, but if there's a lot of people in the queue to call, sometimes that means that I can't spend equal amounts of time with everyone. I hope people understand that. No hard feelings. We'll do another call-in show next week. And then third, you have to keep it within terms of service. So no racial slurs, no calls to criminality, things of that nature. If you say anything that I think will jeopardize the viewing experience for other people or my channel by getting me struck on any of the platforms I'm at, I'll probably have to ask you to leave. But that's basically it. The Discord link is up there. If you join the Discord channel and then you go to the rules and read the rules, if you accept them, you click the American flag, and then all you have to do is go to the waiting room. If anyone else would like to call in and can't figure out Discord, let me know in the chat, and we might have an alternative where you could use your cell phone. And before people mock people that don't know how to use Discord, I'm one of the most technologically illiterate people out there as a 40-year-old, so I'm not about to mock anyone for tech issues. My volume was screwed up last night in the stream tremendously. Can anyone see, I don't know if anyone's able to see if I'm possibly streaming on vertical right now. I don't know. But if anyone could see that, that would be interesting to see. I don't know how to check that sort of situation to see if it's... But, all right. Anyways, we got some callers in the queue. Let's do it. Oh, Bill Hicks in the queue. Using my actual... Oh, he left? Bill Hicks? I used to be on this website called Above Top Secret. That was literally my avatar that I used. That exact Bill Hicks picture. All right. First, we have Alley Cat. Can you hear me, Alley Cat?
Yeah, I can. What about you on your end? You got me?
Yes, yeah. How you doing this morning?
I'm doing okay. So yeah, I'm just like doing the early morning gripes because, up late night, doom scrolling on the internet.
Okay.
And this juicy headline. It's DOGE slashes $190 million for children cancer research.
Mm-hmm.
And so obviously this is the spending bill. But what was the framing was what catches me most, in the sense of it's like, one, let's blame Doge for doing this and not the common people. Second, it's research spending, so it's not like it's spending on treatment, right? It's just the research, so it's basically money going straight to pharma tech companies, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the third part is that you've got the issue that this stuff didn't exist before the spending bill, right? Like, it's not like it's $190 million just going away that was supposed to be there in the first place. This was basically pork added to a bill that, is hopefully signed on, and nobody ever questions where did the money come, where's the money going to come from?
Yeah, so
And
there's
so,
right. So there's a lot of interesting things to say about this. You could take this. The Democrats are very good in how they've set this up. Now, on one hand, if you're honest with yourself, there are cost benefits to everything. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't look in to situations and come to what we think the best solution would be. But there's very few things at life that are just like, and particularly with governmental action, that it's like, this is all good, 100% good. There's no negative to it, right? And so one of the things with a cost benefit is you say, we're going to spend X amount of dollars on this. From the easiest cost benefit that you could see is the benefit would be if that thing does what it says it will do, helps cure cancer. That would be a benefit. But what's the cost? Well, money, right? That's obviously the first cost. But what the Democrats have successfully done is they take out that idea of the cost of the money of things. And they'll just say this. They'll be like, well, we want a bill that's like trillions upon trillions of dollars of spending. And if you're against it, we'll pick out a part of it and say, so you don't want cancer to be cured. See? Yep. Because this says cancer. But they never get the opposite of it. So when you're like, wow, inflation's out of control because of Democrat spending, they'll say, well, Republicans spend too. Right? They never say, yep, we're the ones that want to keep spending. And so what happens is it puts them in a unique situation where you literally just put out 2,000-page spending bills and you say, well, if you're against that spending bill, then that means you're against any specific thing in it. And if in it says, there's a 2-sentence that says also we should not even spend money, we should just declare on January 15th every year that we celebrate cancer survivors. Oh, so you don't like cancer survivors? You want cancer people to die? You don't want them to survive? That's sort of the absurdity of what goes on here. And so what happens is the Democrats will say something like, $190 million to this. And they'll say, you would rather the government shut down to give these people money. But if you go back and you look at the largest shutdown in government history that was, I believe, 31 days, going at the end of 2018 into 2019, yes, it is true. And people pointed this out to me on X. Trump said, I'll take credit for the shutdown. Whatever. Trump's blusterous. Why did that shutdown occur, though? Well, because Democrats refused to sign the bill that the Republicans in the House and the Senate had passed because it wanted to give $5 billion for the wall. And they said no. And so what the Democrats say is, if it's always Republicans' fault if there's a shutdown, always. And that means that all the people that receive government services, whether it be people, single mothers that get WIC benefits and they rely on those benefits to feed their children, or people on Medicare and Medicaid, or government employees over the holidays that are just trying to provide for a good Christmas for their children. Those dastardly Republicans want all of them to suffer. That's who the Republicans are. They want the shutdown. They want it. And then when the shoe's on the other foot, it's like, well, here's a bill. It will fund all of that. They say, because of the wall. Now, I remember, and I bring this up quite frequently, going back to like 2016 or something, I remember watching alleged comedian Jimmy Kimmel go on national television and cry because he was like, I have a child and this shut down and they don't care about insurance for children and children will suffer. Where was he in 2018, 2019? Was he saying, hey, Democrats, just give the $5 billion for the wall so that people could have a good Christmas? I'm afraid that these kids won't have a good Christmas because Democrats refuse to give money for the border wall and fund them. No, all of a sudden the tears weren't there. By the way, secret, all of those government employees get paid anyways. They might just have to wait in their paycheck until the shutdown's over, but they get to stay home and then get paid. A nice little vacation, right? But
yep.
It's so on this topic specifically, right? Yeah, I'm sure that there were things that are allegedly cut out of this massive spending bill because they took it from 1,500 pages to like 100. There's probably all sorts of stuff. That's not the goal of this. The continuing resolution is supposed to be a stopgap measure to take us till March when the new Congress that was elected by the people comes in, with a new president that would come in. That's what we're told the stated point of all of this is. If you can't have spending bills that are simple enough Not at the very least for Congress to read, but they ought to be simple enough for the American people to go through and understand. Not these bloated, you have 24 hours to read 1,500 pages. Bullshit. And the idea that they're going to put something in there like, well, cancer research was in there. What's this say? Let's say in the new bill, which I haven't read, right? The 100-page one, which also didn't pass. But let's say that in there it says, we're going to give money for hurricane victims, which I'm assuming it does. 0 Democrats voted for it. Does that mean Democrats shut down funding for hurricane victims? Can we say that? Can we say because no Democrats are voting for the spending bills that Republicans are putting out that they want a shutdown? That's what they want, right? Why is it just Republicans? Yeah, you're right. 30-something Republicans voted against the bill. Okay, if you want to be cynical and say that proves that they wanted a shutdown, fine. Blame those 30 Republicans. By the way, I disagree with that. I sort of agree with those 30 Republicans. But fine, blame those 30 Republicans. But what about the hundreds of Democrats? They don't get blame? We're supposed to believe that they care about cancer victims. They care about government employees getting paychecks. They care about hurricane relief. And yet they're voting for a shutdown. And of course, they'll tell you the truth. They'll say, well, the reason is we don't like this bill. It funds a bunch of things we don't like. It does things that we don't like. Right, that's the same argument on the other side of the aisle. When Trump said, I'm not going to remove the border wall funding, he said, here's shit we want in the budget. The media, historically, because they've been able to control the narrative, has covered for the fact that when there's a shutdown, guess what? That means that both sides are at least partially responsible. Because if 80% of Republicans and Democrats were voting for it, it would pass and be enough to override the filibuster. So it's clear that there's significant portions of politicians on both sides of the aisle that are voting against it. So why wouldn't we blame both sides to some degree? But because the media, I'll finish on this, because the media controlled the narrative, we accepted that it's always Republicans' fault. Democrats want to fund everything ever, no matter what. They don't care if it costs trillions of dollars. You can't blame the Democrats for inflation, right? But if you don't want to fund any part of that and you say, no, I think this is too much, then you want the shutdown. If you say, well, let's do a bill cutting out all of this extra shit, and we're just going to fund the things that we say are the most important, Democrats will say, nope, we won't vote for that. Just like they're doing right now.
And so I guess to me, what makes it even worse is that they're blaming DOGE for it, right? And make no bones about it, DOGE doesn't exist right now, right? It only will exist January 20th. There's no government agency called DOGE.
Well, here's what DOGE is just a stand-in for Musk. That's all it is. When they're blaming DOGE, they're saying we're blaming Musk. That's it. We blame Vivek and Musk. And you can see this everywhere. They're saying, well, Elon Musk is the shadow president. By the way, it's actually not a bad strategy by the Democrats because they're assuming that they will harm Trump's ego. That Trump's like, I'm the big dog. How dare people say Elon's in charge? That's why you see this memo that went out that now you see all of the Democrat media, pundits, etc. They're all saying Elon's the shadow president. It's designed to try to drive a wedge between Elon and Trump because they want to appeal to Trump's ego and say, oh, you're going to leave this guy be the big dog? But it's ironic, right? They had no problem. They used to laugh at you if you talked about George Soros having so much influence over funding campaigns for prosecutors. Or Zuckerbucks, or the fact that we can see the data shows that the billionaire class has tended to vote for Democrats in most recent elections and support Democrats. They didn't have a problem with any of that. They didn't have a problem with multinational corporations in the majority of the mainstream media or social media being in the tank for Democrats. That was all gravy. Private companies, they could do what they want. Now they have a problem that Elon, he isn't censoring the left-wing people. He's opening it up to allow both sides to be able to talk, which pisses them off because they feel that the right should be censored. Remember, their argument is unless they have 100% control of all of the control of the flow of information, it's not fair. If they only have 99%, that's not fair. They're being cheated. They deserve 100%. You shouldn't have a voice. That's why I show that clip from Ari Melber all the time. Oh my God, before Elon bought Twitter. If Elon buys Twitter, what if he manipulates the algorithm to harm people on the left? What if he kicks off a left-wing candidate for president from his platform? Oh my goodness. Not even having the cognitive ability to see. That's exactly what happened with the old Twitter regime. They kicked Trump off. They censored right-wingers. And the government was advising them to do it all along, right? So what they're really pissed off about, like, I'm sorry, I was arguing with people on this X. I said, what are you mad about? That Elon Musk read the bill and has an opinion? The Vivek read the bill and has an opinion? No, they're pissed off that that's causing Congress people to change their mind. Well, why is it causing Congress people to change their mind? Well, it's not because, I guess I'll just say why. It's because the platform of X now has taken away the monopoly of the mainstream media to monopolize the flow of information. And so now people, the constituents of some Republican that was going to vote for this huge bill, is seeing through X all of these people going, look how shitty this bill is. And so they're saying, I'm going to call my congressman. I don't like this. That's why. It's because Elon is a person that's influential, just like Tucker's a person that's influential, and people are listening to them because of the ability to have free speech that isn't massively controlled by these left-wing media outlets, and so they're pissed off. They're making it sound like it's not the will of the people. It's just one unelected dude that's making all these decisions. No, it's because the people who voted overwhelmingly, not for establishment Republicans, but for Trump, and wanted reform even within the Republican Party, see how much bullshit this spending bill is, and they're raising their voice about it. That's why Republicans are saying, oh shit, we're afraid we'll get primaried. Elon could say, we'll primary you if we're against this, and if 90% of the people said, actually, we're for the funding bill, who would give a shit? So what? Elon will say, we're going to try to push someone in the primary, and people say, why? Because my congressperson did the right thing. They voted for this massive spending bill that I wanted. No, it's because you know, and I know, and every person that's out there saying, oh, Elon Musk is undemocratic. This is undemocratic. One guy's making these decisions. They all know the truth, and that's that particularly Republican voters, but also many Democratic voters are tired of this shit, where we have these huge billions upon billions of dollars of spending bills that are done at the last minute as an emergency because Congress can't get their shit together and balance a budget and have things passed in a normal time frame. So it's always a last minute emergency that no one has the time to read, that's thousands upon thousands of pages long, and people are tired of that shit. Everybody knows it. And yet they're going to pretend, no, that's not the case. This is just one guy. It's undemocratic, one guy. By the way, they didn't have a problem with undemocracy when they lied about Joe Biden's cognitive health, so Democrats didn't have a democratic say in who their candidate would be. Didn't give a shit about democracy then. And they routinely talk about how we need to censor things because they don't give a shit about democracy in that sense. But that's where they're going to be now.
So to maybe finish this off on a semi-related note, both Kamala and Biden flew into D.C. and canceled their vacations last night. And my guess, like, people are like, oh, it's war, it's aliens or whatever. No, my guess is that they're trying to they're trying to figure out what to do about the continuing resolution.
That's probably the case. I saw this last night, like 3 minutes before I went to bed, and my initial thought upon going to bed, I didn't hear the Biden part of it that much, but I thought maybe Biden had a health issue.
Yeah, that was the other possibility, but
I would say yes, Democrats are trying to figure out. Now listen, I'm not too happy with Trump, if I'm honest with this whole thing. Yes, the second bill is better than the first bill, which also didn't pass. But the idea that he wants to raise the debt limit was someone that's fiscally conservative like me. One of the biggest problems I had with Trump's first term was the massive spending. I don't like the massive spending, right? And so Trump being like, well, let's just pass a clean CR and raise the debt limit so I don't have to deal with it for the next 2 years. No, if I voted for a congressman that I wanted to be fiscally conservative, like Chip Roy, I understand Chip Roy saying, no, I'm not going to vote for this shit. I'm not going to, without a serious roadmap into how we're going to cut spending, I'm not going to give Congress the ability to spend trillions of dollars more. No. We can't do that. Now, Chip Roy's done a lot of other shit that I don't like, and I understand why there's animosity between Trump and him. I get it. But I understand people that are like Thomas Massie. I love Thomas Massie. Thomas Massie's a no vote, right? So the idea that he's like, look, no, I don't want to raise the debt ceiling. But in general, not talking about that, I'm sure the Democrats are trying to figure out what to do, and they're going to go back to the same old playbook. And their playbook's going to be, look, we just vote no on everything and then hope we could control the narrative and say Republicans shut down the government. That's what they're going to do. And then they're going to go to their establishment buddies in the Republican Party that aren't MAGA, that hate MAGA, that still want a bloated government spending and blah, 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 blah. And they're going to say, we'll have a compromise like they did the first bill. Let's put in all this shit we want, but we'll give you a couple things that you want too. And that's how it works. And everybody gets their pork. So they're going to be pushing that. I don't know what role specifically Kamala or Biden would have in that. So I don't know. Like, for me, my guess is that if I just took a stab in the dark, you may be 100% right. That's why Kamala and Biden were meeting. But, I mean, at this point, do they think that either Kamala or Biden have the ability to whip members of Congress to do shit? Kamala's a failure and Joe Biden's a vegetable. Yeah. So if anything, I could see Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer having emergency meetings and trying to figure out Pelosi's injured, I think. But you see what I mean. So I don't know. For me, I would say who knows what it is. Maybe Biden just needed Kamala to. Who knows? Yeah.
The other theory is the 25th Biden and have Kamala be the first black woman president. I mean, but I think that's such an outside thing that would look so bad. Literally, really, you're going to get rid of the guy with 30 days to go?
Yeah, I mean, hypothetically, in a legitimate, what's best for the country type situation, Biden should have already been removed. But okay, he wasn't. So let's say now, what if, and I mean this, people are going to think I'm full of shit. I don't wish any physical harm to Joe Biden or Kamala Harris. I don't. But just for the sake of argument, let's say tragically Biden had a stroke last night. On one hand, you're like, well, whatever, 30 more days, 40 more days. As long as he didn't die, we'll just leave him there as a figurehead at this point anyways. Probably not. You would probably say, no, we probably need to put Kamala as the acting, right? Even though there's an argument to be made, well, what's she really going to... I mean, basically Biden hasn't been doing shit anyways for the past 5 months. So what's the difference?
A bunch of people.
What's that? Well, yeah. Well,
he's farting a bunch of people.
I don't know that he did that. Someone took his hand and, as he was eating chocolate chip ice cream in one hand and took his hand and signed the bill or whatever. So, I mean, hypothetically, if there was a tremendous health scare, if Biden stopped breathing or they thought he had a stroke or a heart attack, I could see why it would be sensible to call Kamala Harris and say, hey, we need you here just in case it progresses to the point where, now the idea of this just, Biden's not deteriorating in that way, and they're just like, hey, let's just install Kamala so we could say first woman black president. That's stupid. I don't think that they would do that. They might. I mean, they're dumb, and that virtue signaling that's important. But to me, it's that would massively backfire. People would just be like, this is a joke. What? No one's going to accept that. It's wow, cool, a black president. Just be dumb. So I would say that it's probably, I mean, who knows? It could be, maybe Biden was threatening to spill the beans on how pissed off he is that he was ousted. And they were like, bring Kamala in because the story I've heard is, and I don't know, this is believable, that this part's definitely true. Biden was ousted, which is true. He didn't want to go. They forced him out. But then this is the part that I don't know if it's true or not, but this sounds believable. As a last sort of fuck you, he was like, I'm going to put my weight behind Kamala Harris. Which basically tied the hands of the Obama people that were like, oh, okay, now let's get the best person picked to beat Trump. Because if Biden endorses the VP, now it's going to be real hard to argue it shouldn't be Kamala. Right? Because she's the VP anyways. And the president just endorsed her. So are people going to come out and say, actually, she's not qualified? And we're going to have a big knockdown, drag out primary for the next month? Probably not. And so I'm reading that the people in the Obama faction that wanted to oust Biden weren't too happy that he was like, yeah, cool, and I'm endorsing Kamala. So if that's the case, I don't know if it is, but if that's the case, and Biden's getting a little unruly in his dementia, and he's like, I'm going to say this. Maybe Kamala's still considered someone that could talk some sense into him. Whoa. I don't know. I don't really give a shit. A lot of times, I'm not saying this stuff's not true or that it's not important. It is. But, I can't tell you how many times, it'll be, oh, did you see Biden's plane rerouted and it looks like he went to a medical facility and blah, 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 blah. It's like, maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Alls I know is that Joe Biden wasn't mentally fit to be president for years now. But yeah, there could be health scares or anything like that. I mean, for goodness sakes, look at Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi. I mean,
that's fair. I mean, it's fair to sit there and say that maybe Biden did have some sort of, like, not necessarily a stroke, but some sort of minor health scare. And, this is okay, let's make sure we at least have a plan on what we're going to do about it.
Yeah, but right? I'm certainly not saying that your theory couldn't be correct. It could be all hands on deck. Let's see what's going on with this debt ceiling and, all of this stuff. That certainly could be the case, but. Hey, thanks so much for calling in. We got another caller lined up, but I appreciate it, man. Call back in some other time. Appreciate it as always, Alley Cat.
Thanks.
Thank you, by the way, for the subs and the donations. I noticed that, so thank you.
Bye.
All right. Some super chats real quick. Anonymous Coward for $5 says she crashed out the same with Andrew, didn't read the study. She used a naturalistic fallacy. It's something she calls out red pill for doing. Thank you again. Jack of Trades for $20 says, if it meets spousal approval, I've found a place that will print the Conan image into a woven blanket. That's hilarious, Jack of Trades. It will not meet spousal approval, but you send me that link on Discord and I'll see what I could do. So, all right. I'll put that link to Discord again. We have one caller in queue, but if more people want to come in, we haven't talked about the Nick Fuentes stuff. I'm open to talk about that. Open to talking about the debate I had last night on the OnlyFans model or any other topic that people want to talk about. So if you have something that piques your interest, let me know. Join the Discord there and hop in the waiting room. All right, next we have Black Jaden, who we've talked to several times before. Black Jaden, you there?
Hey, Rob, how we doing?
Good. How you doing this morning?
Good. Just sitting here with my little girls.
Yeah? With, like, actual human daughters or, like, pets?
Oh, yeah, I have twin girls.
Okay. Can they hear me? Because I'll cut the swears down.
No.
Okay.
So I guess I have a couple... Well, I guess this is going to be a hard question to ask, and I feel like a hard question to answer.
Okay.
Involving Nick Fuentes. I'm sure you've heard that he had an assassination attempt on his life, and then also the harassment that he was receiving, which he responded a little crazy to, but he has some pretty bombastic views of the country and what's dragging it down. I think his core beliefs are that Jews and blacks are kind of I wouldn't put it this way, but he says plagues in America quite frequently. And it's some of the things that he says are kind of hard to deny. Like, obviously there's this crime statistics for blacks don't really look good in their favor. Although I know there's a lot of nuance to that conversation. But it's hard to deny the reality of what these statistics say and the rates of crime committed by African Americans, and the whole Jewish stuff is a completely different topic, which is something that has a lot of rabbit hole theories to go down into. But he does make some good points about crime in the country, and I guess my question to you is, how do you address feelings? Because there's a lot of people who share some, I guess, agreements and beliefs that he says, and I guess for the regular conservative, how do you address feelings like that with people who believe similar things to me and you, and how do you correct the reality that the statistics show?
So it is difficult. The first thing I'll say is what not to do. What shouldn't happen is that you should use physical violence against people with those views. I'm sure you would agree with that. But it is worth saying, because there are a lot of people out there saying that this murder, and again, this story is all alleged at this point, but I think that it's all but confirmed that at least parts of this are true. A person who apparently murdered 3 people then proceeded to go to Nick Fuentes' house, who was doxxed recently, and had a situation where people showed up at his door. Now more people showed up to his door. This person, who had already previously murdered people, who was armed and then ended up fleeing from the police. Somehow Nick's dogs got shot, or someone's dogs got shot, and it seems as if police actually killed the suspect. So it is worth saying, what don't you do first? You don't, no matter how heinous you find someone's views, you shouldn't be doxing them. You shouldn't be using physical violence against them. You shouldn't be celebrating attempts at physical violence against them. It's very serious. And if we don't say that there are lines in the sand that we're unwilling to cross, then it makes the things that can actually make the situation better impossible to achieve. Because if we accept that tactics like violence are allowed to be used for people that say things we don't like, then it makes dialogue impossible. Because there won't be a conversation if the rules of engagement are, oh, and by the way, if I don't like what you say, I get to punch you in the mouth, or I get to cheer for would-be assassins showing up to your house. And this goes back to Richard Spencer, who is a figure that would have been similar in the normie understanding. It would be similar, Richard Spencer to Nick Fuentes, in that these are considered people with fringe alt-right beliefs that have feelings about, certain ethnicities and whether or not they have undue influence on our country, et cetera, and possibly want a country that is ethnically based on, white people. You remember when Richard Spencer got punched in the face in like 2015 or 16, and there was this big moment where everyone was like, is it okay to punch a Nazi? The answer is no, it is not. And we had mainstream outlets like The Guardian that was like, well, maybe, here's why. And the problem is, for a litany of reasons, but the easiest way to understand this is, once you say yes, then someone says, cool, and you're a Nazi. That's it. And now everyone's given the excuse to say anyone who disagrees with me on a serious political matter, we've all came to the conclusion that it's okay to use violence against them. And it's a situation you see with this United Healthcare CEO. Same type of thing, right? And so you might think, well, Nick Fuentes I think that he's a Nazi. I think his views are grotesque, et cetera. But I think people that support abortion into the third term are grotesque. Do I get to punch them? Do we understand, well, hey, they've screwed around. Now if someone decides to make an attempt on their life, that's just what you should expect. I don't want to live in that society. And there's certainly a lot of issues that I find mightily grotesque and offensive that all sorts of people, including politicians, support. But I would never say that justifies any calls to violence. So that didn't answer your question, but that's the sort of things we shouldn't do. What should we do? Well, the best thing you could do is to be honest and to talk to people as much as possible and understand their point of view and try to figure out where they're right and where they're wrong. I debated a very smart guy by the name of J.F. Garriepi, and he had a partner named Sean Last, and me and Andrew Wilson debated them. Now, I don't want to put words in JF's mouth. JF, who I think by most objective measures would be smarter than me. I'm just guessing, but I bet if we took an IQ test, JF seems like he's a very smart dude. He's a scientist, He lives in Canada, and I believe it's illegal for him to even say that he is a white nationalist, but I believe he may be. He just isn't going to be able to say that. But certainly he has views that are similar to going in that direction. The problem is, when most people talk to someone like JF, they're going to deny reality because he's going to say hard truths, like some of the things you were saying there. He could bring up crime statistics of blacks. He could bring up the fact that white people are denigrated in many instances in our institutions like academia, the mainstream media, etc. He could bring up that it only seems to be countries that were founded on European descent that have to pay for alleged sins of the past, that aren't allowed to have national pride or ethnic pride, that aren't allowed to say, nope, we don't want people from certain cultures. No one, for example, is saying that African nations aren't diverse enough and must import people from European descent. No one's going back and looking at the, Genghis Khan or Attila the Hun and saying, they attacked the Moors came into Spain and so now they owe reparations, etc., etc. No one says that stuff. JF's right about that. The people that make those sort of arguments are right. The problem is, where do we go from there? Where's the conclusion? And so I say that the idea, they're not going to be right about everything. Like, for example, in that debate I had with JF, he was like, all of the prosecutors that went after Rittenhouse were Jewish. And I was like, were they? Really? All of them? And then you look into it and I'm like, this guy doesn't look Jewish. This doesn't sound like Jewish ethnicity, So sometimes the claims might not, directionally, I think a lot of the claims he's making about harms are true. The significant problem I have is what to do about it. And I think the idea of having a white nationalist state is absurd, or the idea of being, overtly racist, which I don't know that they are, but some people certainly are, I think is absurd. For example, the crime statistics. Yeah, it's undoubtable that there's a significant problem with violent crimes disproportionately being committed by young black men. A lot of it, I think, has to do with people in highly impoverished areas that have a huge amount of population. So a lot of people living in poverty in a very small area. That probably makes it more likely for crime and violent crime to exist. A lot of it has to do with culture that seems to be prolific, particularly in inner city black culture. And we talked about that previously with sort of the OnlyFans things I was talking about. If you embrace and celebrate aspects of culture like that, then it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Maybe some of it has to do with genetics. I don't know. But I think that it's absurd that we just say that that's a topic that we're not allowed to broach. I find it to be ridiculous. Now, can it be true that someone that says, I want to talk about IQ differences is a racist? Certainly. That could certainly be true. But it doesn't mean that if you talk about IQ differences that you are a racist. And I think that one of the ways that we solve problems, and I actually feel terrible, I try to look at it through the perspective of the victims. The majority of victims of inner city black violence are inner city blacks. And so I look at that and say, what can we do to make this situation better? Well, the first step is diagnosing the problem. And if we say, well, there's certain aspects of the problem you're not allowed to talk about, not only will you never solve the problem, but what happens is it creates animosity from the other side that's like, oh, these things must be truthful. We're not even allowed to talk about it, so it must be the reason. And that's true of anything. It's true of the origins of the pandemic. As soon as they told you you can't say it came from a lab in China, what was your conclusion? Wow, that's probably where it came from. That's why they're saying they're not censoring us because they're afraid we're lying. They're censoring us because they're afraid we're telling the truth. That's not always true, but that's the impression that people get. And so there does need to be serious conversations with that, but that's why someone like me would be able to push back more against someone like Nick or someone like JF, because I'm not just saying you're a sack of shit and everything you're saying is a lie because you're a racist and you just hate people. I'm saying actually a lot of the things you're saying is grounded in truth. But what do we do about it? We shouldn't hate people because of their ethnicity. We shouldn't say that they're not welcome in our communities, that this nation is just for certain people. And the problem is so many people that they debate, particularly on the left, just go, you're a racist, fuck you. Okay? That does nothing. So for me, the answer is, how do you deal with these things is you talk about them up front and squarely. That's how you deal with it. You tell people, yeah, a lot of this stuff is true. Do I think Israel, for example, has undue influence on the United States? Yeah, I do. Do I think that means that I think every Jewish person's involved in a conspiracy, that they all want to make, white people their slaves or this, that, and the other, and are intentionally putting black people to commit crime in their community? No, I don't think that. If I look and I see disproportionately young black men are committing these violent crimes, does that mean if a neighbor moves in who's a black guy, who's like the coolest guy in the world and I talk to all the time, he must be ready to commit a murder? Of course not. But you have to deal with these things in an open and honest way. When we look at there's a reason that stereotypes exist. So when I went to college, my first course I took was this, I was in comm, I was going to be a media person. And the first course I took was, we were talking about stereotypes. And the professor said, who here uses stereotypes? And there's probably 20 people in the class. I was the only person that raised my hand. And everyone got pissy with me and started yelling. And I told them, I was like, stereotypes are inevitable. All stereotypes are is you don't have access to specific information, so you're based it on general information that you have. For example, I have a stereotype of what Greece looks like. Now, you might say, I'm from Greece. You're wrong. You think it's all these beautiful, marble buildings with pillars and there's these beautiful shrubs. But that's not where it's like where I'm at. Actually, there's a lot of sand or there's a lot of swampland. Okay. There's no harm in me. I'm using general information. By the way, it makes sense biologically. Is it unfair to stereotype the lion that's coming into your community? Of course not. Now, maybe it's a really nice lion, but you have a general impression. But once you get more specific information, then you update. So, for example, I have a stereotype that tall people are good at basketball. So if you're 6'6", I'm like, damn, guy's probably pretty good at basketball. But then I meet you and you're absolute dog shit trash. Well, now the general information I had that tall people are good in basketball, that is true in general. We could say hypothetically it's true in general. But once I have access to the more specific information, that sort of overrides. The same is true with talking about these other things. It's okay to talk about biological differences. It's okay to admit that men are better at certain things and women are better in certain things. It's okay to say that men in general are physically superior to women. Does that mean if I meet a woman, Ronda Rousey or someone like that I see with the now specific information that she could kick my ass, that I say, no, that can't be true because of the generality? Of course not. The same is true when it comes to these sorts of statistics. But so for me, I'm not going to, and it's the question I've always had with the sort of the white nationalist point of view. For me, I would rather someone share my morals, my ethics, my cultural beliefs than look like me. So I would rather live in a community of people that are good neighbors, that are good fathers, that are great families, that are hardworking. And one happens to be black, and one happens to be white, and one happens to be Jewish, than to live with all white people, but I'm the only one with those values, and all of them are like, we value transgenderism, teaching for children, and drag queen story hour, and victimhood mentality. The ethnicity, the fact that we share an ethnicity is less important to me. You might say, yes, but people that share your ethnicity are more likely to share your values. Maybe true, but what we shouldn't do is exclude the people that don't fit into that mold. And that's where I think the white nationalists, the most obvious reason that they go, by the way, I don't know if Nick Fuentes is a white nationalist. I don't know. But in general, that's where I think they go wrong. Because it's like, well, we don't want these people no matter what, because they're more likely to be X. But I say, for my money, some of the worst groups out there that disagree with me and like sort of my morality are liberal white people, academics. I would rather live with the black guy that works with his hands, that's blue collar, that's a great family man that has conservative values, than to fucking live next to the white liberal that, I just don't give a shit about it. So it's complicated. And I think that with Nick specifically, this might piss people off, but I'm just going to fucking say it. In the limited amount of time I've seen Nick Fuentes, I think he's funny and he's charismatic and he's very smart. And that makes it tough. It makes it tough if you disagree with him, because those are traits that make someone more influential, that makes people more likely to hear him. By the way, I'm not saying that Nick's doing this as some, like, oh, he's cheating, or no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that, like, so to say, well, the way you deal with it is you talk to them, you debate them, you have these arguments. Well, not everyone is equipped to win those debates. I don't even know that I am. And so you might say, well, I know that he's wrong, but I can't beat him in the debate. So Rob's strategy of, well, you have to take these arguments on face on doesn't really apply here. I've told people, the debate, people ask me all the time, who would be the person I would fear to debate most? You know who it would be? This guy by the name of Jared Taylor. Jared Taylor basically is a white nationalist. The dude's way smarter than me. He is. He's incredibly intelligent. And he's likable, and he's calm. And that makes it, he has a worldview that I really don't like. And that then makes it a challenging debate for me, because if I lose a debate to, Andrew Wilson on should we smoke cigarettes or not, who gives a shit, right? But if I lose a debate on something that I really believe, that's worse, right? So I don't know. I hope that answers your question. I think, the way I think you take those arguments head on and you tell people, yeah, those numbers, you don't lie. You don't say those numbers about black crimes are wrong. You could say, well, we have to ask ourselves why these numbers exist. And regardless of what conclusions we come to of why they exist, does that mean we should treat the whole group of people, even if it's true that 50% of violent homicides or whatever are committed by young black men? What percentage of black people are committing that? Not a lot. It's still a very minute percentage of blacks that are committing murder, etc. So, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, no,
I'll
I
give you a
mean,
chance to respond.
that pretty much covers everything that I was kind of wanting to, get your thoughts and opinions on. I kind of feel that a lot of things he says is true. A lot of things that he says are kind of exaggerated and not the right way to go about things. But I mean, it's hard to deny what facts are and what
That's
the
right.
reality of the situation is. And
I'll give you.
I have one more quick question.
Sure.
Before,
Before you get to the question, I want to give you an analogy. See if this works for you. Okay. I sometimes think, like, again, I don't watch Nick a lot, but I've seen people like that. In my head I associate kind of like Nick. I think that it's a problem that you saw with Alex Jones, right? Where Alex Jones, I think he's so heavily invested in a lot of this conspiracy shit, and there's a lot of what he's looking into that's either true or grounded in kernels of truth. And it's like a lot of information that he's processing over and over and over again. And then what he ends up saying is, once you start getting into that, everything's a conspiracy. Everything. So anytime there's a mass shooting, Alex Jones is going to be like, government, MK Ultra. God damn it, they're turning the frogs gay and they're forcing these shooters, blah, 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 right? Like, that's what it's going to be. But sometimes no. Sometimes it's just a mass shooter. And for me, these people that want to scream like, well, it's Jewish people. It's always Jewish people. It's always Jewish people. It's always Jewish people. I think that there's obviously truth grounded in the fact that Jewish people do tend to, let me be careful, I'm not getting too much trouble here. I think Jewish people tend to, because of historical things and because of the small amount of their global population, tend to sort of have an affinity to protecting their group class. That's true of other groups, like gay people do the same, black people do the same, etc. But it's people that are perceived minorities that say we're going to advocate for issues that benefit ourselves. So that's certainly true. And certainly I think the nation of Israel has done some shit, like the bombing of the USS Liberty, the undue influence and money and influence that's put into the United States to influence our politics, etc. I think there's rife for criticism there. I absolutely do. Does that mean that I think that all Jewish people are evil? No, I'm not saying that, right? But I think what happens is once you start to dig down this rabbit hole, you're like, everything's Jewish people's fault. Everything, it's always the Jewish people, right? And I think that that you're going too far. Just like Alex Jones that thinks, who's admitted, once you think something's a conspiracy, everything's a conspiracy. So I see a lot of similarities there, and I wonder if someday in the future Nick would say, okay, on these specific situations, I was like, well, this is Jewish people's fault. And it turns out that wasn't true. But that's just because I look at this so much that I just assume everything's the problem.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of explainable ways to explain Jewish power and wealth. And I mean, what a lot of people don't understand is that the Jewish community is a very tight-knit community, and they trickle down their wealth from the top through their families, which they have very large families because that's just part of their culture.
Someone in the chat says it's a bad analysis. It's not just because they're a minority. Now, I'm not saying it's just because they're a minority. What I'm saying is, when you're a group that says, if you're 80% of the world, then you're not really worried on being protecting your in-group because you're like, fuck it, we're strong. We. But when you're not that, when you're a very small percentage, there's more of an incentive for you to say, we have to come together and protect out mutually for our interests. And you're just saying they're black, Jaden. Yeah, it tends that Jewish people are a lot of tight-knit communities. For example, my father-in-law drives oversized loads, and sometimes they would drive houses out to Jersey, and I forget the name of this town, but it's crazy. We were going through it, and he's like, yeah, this is Jewtown. And I was like, ooh, that sounds a bit iffy, what? But you go through, and he's not wrong. It's a Hasidic town. All the signs that have both languages. You see people walking down the street, and they're in traditional Orthodox Jewish garb, and it's like an entire town. And I'm like, well, you don't really see that with oh, this is a Protestant. Everyone has a, is Orthodox. I guess something that you would know from their clothes, like Orthodox Christian. I don't know any Orthodox Christian towns. I don't even know any Muslim towns around here, though obviously in Dearborn that exists more. So it's kind of oh, this is sort of a group of people that came together and said, we want to live together. And by the way, there's no problem with that at all. Yeah, I think you're right that Jewish people are tight-knit. because of whatever circumstances may be. And a lot of them, whether it be because genetically, people that want to talk about IQ differences, it's always interesting to me. Like when they talk about white supremacy and IQ differences, like traditional white people aren't on the top. They wouldn't be supremacists. Like there's all sorts of ethnicities that traditionally have higher IQs than just, people of European descent, and Ashkenazi Jews tend to be near the top of that. And you could say because of legitimate or illegitimate reasons of their ancestors that they've inherited wealth and they have this tight-knit community and they want to share it with members of the community. I don't have a problem with that. Whatever wealth I gain, I'm sharing with my fucking family when I'm gone. And I think that's perfectly legitimate. So there are a lot of reasons for it, but yeah, I agree. It's tight-knit communities and, yeah.
All right, so let me get to my last quick question before you kick me out. So you live in a pretty woodsy area, right?
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, this is just a fun question. Do you think Bigfoot could be real? And have you ever had an experience, or do you know somebody who ever's had an experience?
I don't know anyone who's had an experience. Do I think he could be real? Possibly. I wouldn't rule out anything. For those that say that it's clearly a joke, look, they used to say the giant squid was fake, and now we know it's real. So is it possible that out there is a small population of hominids that, yeah, it's possible. I would say that even if that's the case, 99.9% of sightings or people that think they've seen sightings, it's bullshit. I'm not saying they're intentionally lying. Some of them obviously are. But I would say that given how expansive we are as a population at this point, if Bigfoot existed, the numbers of them would have to be pretty low. I don't think it's going to be like the black bear or something where there's thousands of them in the United States. But I don't know. If I had to say a gut feeling, I would say no, that it's not real. But I also wouldn't be shocked if it was. But I know a lot of people that are hunters. I've spent a lot of time in the woods around here. And I don't know anyone who personally has ever had a tale of Bigfoot. I do know that some of those Bigfoot shows have came around here within like 20 miles of where I live and had episodes on it where there were people that said, oh, I have a sighting or whatever. But I haven't personally known anyone like that.
All right. Well, thank you for answering my questions,
Yep.
Rob. That was a interesting take on the first question for sure. I'll have to think about that a lot. So have a good day, man.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Good stuff. All right. We got more callers. Oh, now we got some celebrity callers too. Woo. All right. We're going to go. I didn't see the order, but we got Will Woofter. Then we got Bubblegum Gun, who I believe is the most important man in the world. And then we got Raceland. Will, what's happening?
Hello?
Hey, what's happening?
Hey, Rob, how you doing, man?
Good, good.
That's good, man. I wanted to ask real quick. It's snowing in my area of Pennsylvania. Is it snowing for you?
Well, it's just ever so slightly right now, but we probably got 3 inches last night.
Nice,
I
nice.
see out the window just a little bit.
Cool. Well, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I actually wanted to kind of piggyback off of what you were talking about, like with Fuentes and things like that. I wanted to get your opinion. So, from my understanding, like even up to the point of like the first assassination attempt with Trump, and then up to the second one, then we had the United CEO healthcare. I think that, and then up to this one as well. I think that I wanted to ask your opinion, like, because I'm thinking that it's like more so like mob rule taking over. And in terms of like mainstream media pushing it. I mean, you probably saw the clip of on Pierce Morgan when that girl literally said, she was joyful when she saw that video, and it's kind of incentivizing people. And personally, I actually had to call a local police department to try and report somebody on social media for making very, very crazy posts, like it's just scary stuff that would make me think like, if you see something like this, you should say something to the police to get them on the radar. And I just wanted to get your opinion on how we can actually like combat that, other than, because I usually just say like, you're absolutely insane. It doesn't matter what you agree with. Like if you disagree with the person on the policy or whatever, that does not give you the justification to go out and assassinate them. So I just want to get your take on it and see what we could do.
Well, I think that the first thing you do is you try to appeal to there are extreme people that you're not going to reach, right? It's just the way it is. When I debate someone, I always in my head think that there's 5 potential people that are listening. Ideally, when I'm talking, and this matters because let's say I'm talking in the scenario you're talking about. Let's say I'm talking to someone that says, "Hey, screw it, Nick's a really bad guy. I wish they would have taken him out." Right? So ideally, in that discussion with that person, which we'll call a debate for the purposes of this, or any debate I do, the ideal scenario is that I win the debate so much that they say, "Wow, shit, yep, you're right." But that's almost never going to happen. Even debates where you're objectively crushing someone, and 99% of the audience is like, "Yeah, that was really bad. That person got crushed." The chances of that person saying, "Yep, I got crushed," usually not very high, right? So what you have to remember is that there's more people watching than just that person. Now, that's not always true. If you're having a conversation with someone at your house, a friend comes over, and it's just you two sitting there, then clearly there aren't more people watching. But there are more people watching your life, even many people that you don't think about. And how you act, by the way, is always more important than how you talk and what you say. But in general, if you honestly have the opinion that these sorts of calls to violence are wrong, and you act as such, and you repeatedly talk about it when it comes up, people notice that stuff. And so the 5 people in the groups in the audience would be people that are almost always going to agree with you, and people that are almost always going to disagree with you. Those 2 groups, you're probably not going to change either of those minds, no matter how good or bad you do. Then there's people that's leaning towards agreeing with you, and people that are leaning towards disagreeing. Those people's minds can change. And then there's people that are indifferent or that are on the fence. And so what I'm always trying to think is, how do we get those groups of people? And in this question specifically on whether or not these types of political violence are acceptable, I think that those middle 3 groups vastly outnumber, I hope at least, vastly outnumber the 2 extreme groups. Right?
Yeah, the extremists.
And so what we should be seeking to do is to make it so socially unacceptable to talk publicly about that, yeah, I think doxing's cool, yeah, I think assassination attempts are cool against people I disagree, that those people lose all political and cultural power to the maximum ability. And so that's the first step, that you just have to be steadfast and saying like, no, this is wrong. In an attempt to appeal to a specific person, I guess the best you could do is probably appeal to their own unique situation. So if you accept this as this is the proper framework for how we should act, are there people that would feel that then violence is justified against you or your family? And the truth is, yes, for almost all of us. I'll give you an example. I have a friend who's a very pleasant person, who has left-wing leanings, who, has friends that are in the LGBT community, who's, didn't like Trump, etc., etc. And by all metrics would be a good, standard, pseudo-progressive Democrat. He works on an oil field. That means he's ripe for assassination because if we accept that the framework is, well, people that engage in actions that we think are massively detrimental to the world, we have the right to use violence against, he's contributing to climate change. Directly.
Yep.
And so it doesn't matter that it's like, no, I'm a good person and I think that healthcare CEO is a bad person. That's irrelevant. To this, a large portion of people that said, yep, that healthcare CEO, and yep, Nick Fuentes are getting what they deserve, and yep, Donald Trump got what he deserved, and yep, Corey Competor got what he deserved, a large portion of them are going to say, oh, you work on the oil wells? Well, then that's what you deserve. Yeah. And so you hope you could appeal to those people. For me, we have to have a framework for what is acceptable before we talk about the specifics. Because the problem is, we sometimes are certain that we're right about something, and then we're not, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you say, well, if I'm right, I get to use violence against you. I think I'm right, therefore here comes the violence. What happens 2 months later when I find out, oh, I was wrong? Well, too late now. And so what we do instead, and even if you say, well, I'm never wrong, which I've talked to people that say that, right? You're full of shit, one. But secondly, well, okay, but other people will be wrong. And they'll, once you say, this is the framework we should all agree upon, if you take actions that I think will personally aggress against me in a serious way, or that will harm the world in a serious way, then I have the right to preemptively use violence against you. There are people that will say, we accept that framework, and now we're going to use violence against you. And so
it's like a slippery slope.
Yeah, and it's not even that slippery at this point. They just, lest we forget, it seems like a lifetime ago. Remember when Steve Scalise got shot at a Republican ball field? Mm-hmm. Remember the assassination attempts of Trump, 2 of them? Remember when Rand Paul got the shit beat out of him and people laughed about it? Right? Like, yes, it is true that there are shitheads on all sides, and I will call those out. As disgusting, one of the posts that I put out there was, I would love to see a Venn diagram of the people on X yesterday that were celebrating or laughing or mocking or happy that someone tried to kill Nick Fuentes, defending that action in some sense, because Nick's a bad person, he has it coming because of his rhetoric. I'd love to see a Venn diagram of those people and people that are fans of Destiny, who said that if you go to a Trump rally, you're effing around and finding out. And so if you get shot, you should have known, because that's the risk you had.
Yeah.
So if using that same logic, if you say, well, I find Nick's rhetoric deplorable, despicable, etc., 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 and so ha ha ha, God forbid that some assassin shows up to Destiny's house. Wouldn't the same logic apply? Well, he's had some outlandish rhetoric. He should have expected it. And my argument would be, if there were groypers out there, if that happened, and there were groypers out there that were like, haha, Destiny, I would say, no, fuck you. But that's not what happened. What happened was it was an attempt on Nick's life, and we see all these people, many of them who are probably Destiny fans, saying, ha ha ha, that's what Nick gets. And what you need to understand is, like even me, I don't think that I have opinions as controversial as Destiny or as Nick Fuentes. But there are people, like, you wouldn't believe the lies that are told about me. It's insane. Like, I get threats, not anywhere near the point of other people, I'm assuming. But I still get threats. And, like, I've had people show me, like, Reddit's the worst of the worst. I've had people show me, like, message boards that are discussing me on Reddit that will be like, what I hate the most about Rob is how he thinks that, like, all gay people should be put in camps and not allowed to be married. What the fuck are you talking about? Like, I debate the Christian nationalists all the time on how I support gay marriage. And yet there's these unhinged fucking lefties like, Rob's trying to commit genocide against gay people. What? And so someone hears that shit and is like, yeah, screw this guy. Anyone who advocates for that sort of genocide has it coming. What are you talking? It's not even true. One, they wouldn't have it coming even if I did say that. But second, I didn't even say that. And so that's how quickly this could get out of control. And this shit happens. I'm just going to tell you straight up, I don't give a shit, right? Like, one of the groups that I've seen this the most, and I'm not saying this is indicative of everyone that's in this group, but I'm saying that I saw this type of shit the most, were trans people and trans advocates on Twitch. Where it wasn't even just calls to violence, but it was things like my place of employment getting called, my channel getting mass reported. So I say, then I don't want to deal with you people. I'm not going to deal with unhinged people where I have to worry about getting swatted or doxed or physical threats or losing my job or getting my channel removed, etc.
Yeah.
I don't want to deal with it. Nick, by the way, now, Nick was probably in the wrong to just open his door in that previous situation and pepper spray someone, if that's how it occurred. I don't know.
Yeah.
Even if someone's harassing you,
Well,
I don't think...
even then, my pushback on it would be, like, that's the justification, though, because at least on his extreme, he is an extremist, but at least on his end, he knows that people will actually try and do it.
That's true.
If there's big name, or if there's big news about him, somebody's going to do something.
That's true, but then the answer is don't open the door.
Yeah, for
Right,
sure. I think he wanted to do it out of pettiness and out of spite.
Now, ultimately, I think the penalty for that should be very small if he's...
Yeah.
But this will certainly be a defense that he offers in that charge. But anyways, I've now seen the video of the body cam footage from the police of the second woman that was on the scene, and she's insane. And you can see how if you're Nick, you would be fearful. And It's so funny to me. It's something I wanted to talk about, but I never did, so I'll bring it up now. She's like, this guy's a white supremacist, and the things he says online, and he says, your body, our choice. If you're too stupid to see that Nick Fuentes was trolling, right?
Yeah.
Because here's what happened. Nick, going into the election, was like, you know what? Trump's doing a bunch of shit that I don't support. Why should I support this guy?
Yep.
Right? That's what Nick stands from. Now, I'm an outsider. I'm just seeing basically his post on X. I'm not watching his videos. But it seemed to me...
I watched him debate, and he specifically said he wasn't voting for Trump.
Yeah, right? And that's what I seem to see from his post on X. And then as soon as Trump won, he's like, yay, we won. And I got that as him winking and nodding to his audience like, hey, we'll take credit for the win even. It's actually funny. That to me is funny. I'm like, it's pretty good. You know, some guy was like, don't vote for this guy. And as soon as he wins, he's like, we won. We did it. We've collectively done it. And that's what it was in that same vein that's like, yep, your body, our choice forever. He's pointing out the absurdity of the hyperbolic rhetoric of the left that's claiming that we're going to end up in some Handmaid's Tale. And he's saying, oh, yeah, you're right. That's exactly what's going to happen. We have total control over your body. He's pointing out the absurdity of it. And people want to hate him for whatever reasons, and they're so unhinged anyways that they take the shit literally, or they pretend to take it literally so that they can have an excuse to justify their worst impulses because they're shitty people and they want to use violence and they want to use intimidation to go after people. So they just need an excuse. That's what's going on. So yeah, I mean, I hope that what happens is, you know, legislatively, what could we do? I hope there's penalties for doxing people. I hope that, like, it's the same with swatting. If they catch people doing this shit, throw the fucking book at them. Set an example that this is not acceptable. It is not acceptable. And I think beyond that, we should publicly shame people. And it should be something. If I'm an employer and I find out that you're doxing people, your ass is gone. Yeah. Or if I find out that you're like, yep, we should assassinate people we disagree with politically, I don't want you around me. I don't want you around my job. I don't want you around my family, period. We could have political disagreements. You could want Medicare for all. You could say, I think reparations should be given to black people. Hell, you could even say that I think we should have an amendment that says that abortion should be legal. All of that, I'm willing to at least entertain that we just have political differences, even if I think your political opinions are terrible. Right? But once you start saying, well, if I disagree with you enough, then I'm allowed to cheer for your assassination. Fuck you. I don't want to be around that type of person. And I hope that the whole of society starts to embrace that. This is what frustrated me after the healthcare CEO, where, you know, a good friend of the show, I won't mention his name here, right? A good friend of the show who's a libertarian was kind of like, well, we shouldn't talk about this because actually, and there were right-wing people that were like, you know, this healthcare CEO. And it's like, you realize you're on the cusp of this epic victory where people are fed up with the insanity of the left and they're literally out there celebrating this shit, you know? And like, all you got to do is take the victory and just be like, no, we don't accept political violence. This is horse shit. You tried to assassinate Trump. You're cheering for this shit. You guys are becoming unhinged. And so there's still, it's far less than the people on the left, but there's a smattering of people on the right that are like, well, and that's why I went so hard at those people. I'm like, you dumb shits. This is so
because you're basically martyring the dude.
Yeah.
And you're basically incentivizing other people to do the exact same thing. Like, what happens when it happens again?
Someone says, Butterfinger says, Nick's groypers have been doxing people since the beginning. Andrews had a standoff with them because they threatened to reveal his family home and location. They should be held to the same standard then.
Yep.
First off, like, here's a problem, right? How much is Nick responsible for the people that associate with his group? Now, if Nick Fuentes went to someone and said, I want you to dox Andrew Wilson, then yes, Nick Fuentes is to blame. But if Nick Fuentes is in an argument with Andrew Wilson, they're both like, fuck you, no, fuck you. And then someone who's a Nick fan or streams on, what's it called, Cozy, decides they're going to dox Andrew, is that Nick's fault? Similarly, if I debate Destiny and Destiny's like, hey, Rob, you're blacklisted, eat shit, blah, 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 and then one of his followers doxing me, that's not Destiny's fault at all. Yeah, and it is so,
him on ChatGPT, like, and then incentivizes somebody to give his house address out. Like, that's the exact same thing. It's not ultimately Destiny's fault. It's not even anywhere near to his own fault. He's not telling these people, he's not directing these people to do this. So you people have to, the thing is that, like, I think people lack accountability nowadays, and they just expect like the bigger guy to take the fall for someone's actions, and you have to hold people in their own accountability.
I agree. And I think that, you know, for me, I hope that cooler heads prevail. Maybe, if it's true, I don't know. By the way, someone's saying Nick Scropers did this. Maybe they did, maybe they did. I don't know. And I know enough to know that sometimes you hear stuff that it's not exactly the full story. So I'm not saying that's true or not. But I will say this. If that occurred, which it may very well have, maybe this is a wake-up moment for them. Maybe they say, wow, the guy we really like just got doxxed and someone almost assassinated him. So maybe that's a tactic we're not going to use anymore because we could see the serious ramifications of that. No, maybe not. Maybe they say, oh, this is even more incentive to go out and do this even more, fight fire with fire. I hope not, though. I hope that...
The good thing is that I would say the one good thing about this, even though it's not good at all, is that at least this sheds light on something that we could probably push legislation for, because these are probably the opening starts of it. I'm not saying that doxing isn't an old thing, but like at least with this, Nick Fuentes is in his name and whatnot, everything that's going on with him. Maybe we can push legislation for something like that can be done, so that way things could be prevented from happening like this again.
Yep. So
it doesn't benefit anyone in any party.
Totally agree. So, all right, man. Well, hey, thanks for the call. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'll just say this is the first time talking to you. I love listening to you, and I did listen to the debate last night, and it was a funny ass bait and switch that she played with that serial monogamy.
Yeah, right. It was good stuff, right? Thanks, Will. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah,
all
man.
Right.
Take care.
Take it easy. We got one super chat, and then I'll get to the next. Cody Folsom for $2 says, "Hey Rob, hope all is well." Absolutely, all is well. Glad to be here. So, all right, who we got next? We had Will. I think we got Bubblegum Gun, the most important man in the world. What's up, Bubblegum Gun?
Hey.
How you doing today?
Hey, I'm good.
Staying safe, doing the Lord's work.
Of course.
Good.
Yeah. You were talking about honesty, and there's a lot of conservative, this nationalists have like to posture that, but you're a person who advocates for giving gays all the rights that straight people have, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can only choose one. So if you want to be honest with yourself, you're either gonna have to choose being a Christian or advocating for secularism. So
I don't have to choose for that. I don't have to choose for that. I could say that that's not true. I could say that I have. That's not true. Do you think all sin? Do you think all sin should be illegal?
Absolutely.
Okay, I disagree with you, and so do most Christian nationalists.
Well, then you're not a Christian. So you're one of these.
That's
Jordan
not true.
Peters.
That's not
Well,
true.
You're Jordan Peterson type Christian.
Okay,
You're
so for example,
Christian.
you said previously that you feel that homosexuals should be stoned to death, correct?
And that I feel? No, it's not that I feel.
That's what you said. That's what you said.
I didn't say that.
Legally, should the punishment for homosexuality in a Christian worldview be death?
Yes.
Can you show me in the New Testament where it says that?
New Testament?
Yes.
It says in the Old Testament.
Right. Well, Christianity, the covenant with God changed with the death of Christ. Can you show me in the New Testament? Can you show me in the New Testament where it says that?
Rob, can you tell me where anywhere in the Bible it says that the old law is now abolished?
Yeah, with the covenant with Christ. With the covenant with Christ. So then it would have been a sin for Jesus to see sin and not punish it legally, correct?
Yes,
and not advocate for the punishment, correct?
Yeah, so when he saw that that woman who was cheating, who was being an infidel, unfaithful with her husband, the reason he didn't stone her is because the male cheater wasn't there. That's the only reason he didn't stone the woman.
Then why did he wash the feet of prostitutes?
Well, it doesn't say you're not. Yeah, the Bible doesn't. God.
He would want that prostitute murdered. You're saying the only reason he wouldn't murder her is because the guy sleeping with the prostitute's not there.
Yes. So, yes, old law. You still need witnesses. It's not.
So Jesus sinned. According to you, Jesus sinned.
No, according to the Jews, the Jews believe Jesus has sinned.
All right, are you Jewish?
I'm not Jewish.
You're Christian.
No.
You're not Christian either.
No.
Okay.
I said I believe in God.
So let me get this straight. You say I'm a bad Christian, and at the core of belief of Christianity is that, please, let me finish. At the core of the belief of Christianity is that Jesus is the Son of God, and he is the only human being without sin. And you just got done telling me that to be a real Christian, I have to want to punish with capital punishment all sin, and then simultaneously told me Jesus didn't do that, which would mean that Jesus sinned.
Rob, if you're going to use Christianity as the basis for your justification, you can no longer just abandon the basis of your justification.
That's not true. There's nothing that says that all sin has to be made illegal with capital punishment. Show me where it says that. Show me where it says that.
What do you think they do? Stoning to death That means you die.
Okay. Hey, thanks again, Bubblegum Gun, the world's most important person, for calling in.
Rob.
We're not going to have this conversation anymore. I thought maybe you wanted to talk about something else. I don't really appreciate talking about people that are going to get my channel banned because they're talking about the murder of homosexual. I'll make my point one more time. My personal morality and what I think is a sin or not isn't just based on the legality of something. I think that there should be things that are sin that are illegal, like murder. There should be things that are sin, such as premarital sex and stuff like that isn't illegal. That's what my belief is, and I don't think that those are mutually exclusive. So, all right, next caller. Let's go with Josie, who I haven't talked to in a while. Josie, what's happening? Can you hear me?
Oh shit! What's up?
What's happening? How you doing today?
Hey, good. You long time no see or long time no hear, I guess.
It's great to hear from you again. I hope everything's going well.
Yeah, same here. Hey, I don't know if you were listening to the X Spaces going on yesterday with I think Suleiman was there and a few right wing. I wouldn't say like influencers, but you know that crowd.
Okay,
You know what I'm talking
I didn't hear it. No, I don't even know who Suleiman is. Suleiman
okay.
the Great, like the that's all I would know. But
Now they were talking about what happened with Nick Fuentes and
okay,
basically that it's very convenient when it happens to, let's say, JD Vance or anybody who has ties to the Israeli lobby, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to Nick Fuentes, who pretty much denounces a lot of what he believes to be true in government, then all of this, and sorry, I'm like kind of trying to tiptoe around TOS here.
let me see if I could say this, and you say if this is sort of the point you're trying to make. Yeah. Elon Musk allowed the public doxing on X of Nick Fuentes because Elon is beholden to the Jewish lobby, and the Jewish lobby doesn't like Nick Fuentes, and so therefore they're like, wink, wink, nod, nod. It's okay if he gets doxed, but if someone else got doxed, Elon Musk would step in and say that shit's not allowed on X. Is that basically?
Yeah, that there's a lot of favoritism going on. And yeah, I just wanted to have your take on that, basically.
Okay, so two things to say on this. One, oftentimes what happens is bad behavior will occur on a platform, and the people that are in charge with moderation of that platform don't see it. Now, this is obviously true in the
Rob, 16 million views.
Okay, let me finish.
That's a lot.
Let me finish.
Sorry.
So we can see that this is obviously true at one end of the spectrum. If someone's streaming to one person and they say something that's heinous, you can't expect, for example, Elon Musk or YouTube, etc., to pick that up. Now, once they're made aware of it, it's different. So when you see someone that says something that's more prolific, so like a mainstream figure says something, so for example, if Donald Trump would call for someone's life, that's obviously something that the people that are running these platforms probably would have notice of. But it could also be someone that doesn't have that high of a profile. For example, could be someone who maybe is just a person of my level that doesn't have a lot of reach, or maybe someone who even has less reach than me, but says something that goes viral and it ends up with a lot of posts. Then we could say that we heavily suspect that the people that are running the platforms are more likely to have seen it. So if this particular post had 16 million people or something like that, I would say that at that point, there's probably a very good chance that if not Musk himself, people with moderation powers at X were informed of this, probably by many people saying, what the hell's going on? This should be taken down. So I think it would be fair to say at this point that some level of moderator, whether it be Elon Musk, I can't say that Elon Musk himself would have known about this, but it's sort of irrelevant to the broader discussion because the people Elon surrounded himself with, someone would have been aware of this. So then why wasn't this taken down? So the question I would have is, how frequently are these sorts of doxing things taken down? Is it that every time there's doxing of this case, it's been taken down except the Nick Fuentes case? I don't know. I don't know that that's the case. But let's, for the sake of argument, say, okay, it is. Every other person that's been in a similar situation, that doxing information's immediately been taken down. That still doesn't jump to the conclusion, that proves Elon Musk is in with those damn Zionists. That's why they're doing it, right? It could be that Elon Musk just says, fuck Nick Fuentes. I think him and his crew have said some vile, heinous shit, and I think him and people in his crew have doxed people in the past, so turnabout's fair play. Not a good look for Elon Musk. It's not something that I would celebrate, but it is possible that that's what it was. It could be possible that he just says, I don't like racist, and I think Nick Fuentes is a racist, and that's why I allowed it. Also not a good look for Elon Musk. But to jump to the conclusion that, this proves that Elon Musk was aware of the doxing and allowed it because his handlers in Israel told him, yes, allow this to occur. I guess my question to that would be, why didn't the handlers in Israel say to lock up Nick Fuentes when he was there January 6th? If they're so all-powerful and they're all about bringing down Nick Fuentes, even to the tune of wanting him to get assassinated, they had their opportunity to throw him in jail for like 20 years. Why didn't they do it?
That's true.
So I don't know. I mean, I tend to think probably the most likely scenario for this is Elon Musk didn't personally weigh in at all about the doxing of Nick Fuentes. There's probably people that work at X that are like, fuck Fuentes. We see this doxing. We see that it's against terms of service, but we're going to let it go. And then bad shit happened because of it. I would hope that Elon Musk would look into that. And I would hope that he'll give a response, but maybe he won't, because he doesn't like Nick Fuentes. Or maybe it's not even that he doesn't like Nick Fuentes, but as someone who's connected to Trump, he knows that the media story will be, if he does anything that's considered helpful to Nick Fuentes, that it'll be, remember when Nick Fuentes had dinner with Trump? Oh, see?
Right.
And now Elon Musk and Trump, and now Elon's going out of his way to personally weigh in to the situation with Nick Fuentes. See, this direct line from America First and Nick Fuentes and Trump is still there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, maybe that's the case.
That's a good point.
But I don't know. I mean, is it within the realm of possibility that Benjamin Netanyahu personally called up Elon Musk and said, yes, good, we see the doxing of Nick Fuentes. We know this will lead to attempts on his life. Yes, allow it. And Elon said, yes, sir, whatever you want for the Zionist state. I guess. But, I mean, for me, it's like, I don't know. I mean, what I would say to those people, particularly the Nick Fuentes supporters, don't they get equally pissed off when there's like almost an equal conspiracy on the other side where people say, obviously Nick Fuentes is a Fed because he wasn't arrested January 6th.
Yeah.
Right? And so they're going to be like, well, that's ridiculous to jump to that conclusion. But then at the same time, they'll jump to the conclusion, oh, clearly it's a Mossad operation or whatever that Elon Musk allowed this doxing. I don't see it. But I don't mind them raising questions. The situation is ripe for questioning anytime that a lot of people knew that something occurred, and millions of people saw this post of the doxing of Nick, right? And then there was a public incident where someone showed up, and it resulted in, not as serious, but still a serious situation where Nick ended up using mace and getting arrested, or pepper spray, whatever it was. And now there's an assassination attempt. It warrants scrutiny. Why was this allowed to happen? What's the standard? We should all want the standards to be clear and evenly applied. If the standard is you can't dox on this platform, something wrong happened. And we want to know and answer why. Why was that allowed to occur in this case? And my gut feeling was, if that's what happened, it was allowed to occur by some moderator in this case. I don't think that it was necessarily from the call of Israel. It's probably just people that are like, I hate Nick Fuentes. I think he's a disgusting racist. That still doesn't make it right, but I'm just saying I don't see that that's necessarily evidence that this was a call from, the Jewish lobby or Israel's government or something like that. I guess that's my take on it. But I don't mind people questioning it because I think that we deserve answers. And I think what happened to Nick, regardless, I don't think I hate Nick as much as that. I don't know the guy. I don't. Like, I've never had an interaction with him. But regardless, let's say the worst that people say about him is true and that he's this despicable, terrible, racist, blah, 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 blah. He still doesn't deserve this shit. It's ridiculous.
He's actually a really, really nice guy.
But... I've said this before. I debated Richard Spencer, who was at one point probably the biggest white nationalist in the United States. Incredibly polite, but was reasonable to talk to, easy to discussion to have. J.F. Gary Eppie, who's someone that would, I think what people would associate kind of in the Nick, incredibly polite, easy to talk to. People say he murdered his wife. I don't know, right? All I could do is, I think, and this is something I'd say about Nick. I know that all I could do is judge people based on the interactions I've personally seen or had with them. Because I look at myself and I know what I believe and what I say, and I see the lies that are spread about me. There are people that say that I'm LGBT hating, not that dude that just called in and was like, we should stone all gay people, right? There are people that think that's my belief, no matter how many times I directly argue against that type of shit. And so, given that that's how I'm interpreted by groups, how do I know that what I'm filtering and hearing through Nick Fuentes is true? I don't. So I'm not going to pass judgment other than the things I specifically have heard him say or do. I'm not. I don't give a shit if someone says, but trust me, he's really a racist. He's really this, that, and the other. Maybe, but until I see it for myself, I don't think it's fair to judge people based on internet drama because people say all sorts of shit, you know? People said shit about that about you. People said, "Oh, don't debate Josie. It's gonna be fucking crazy." Like, I thought it was
right, anyways.
Well, I thought it was fine. I didn't have a bad experience. No, maybe they're
They
right.
were right.
Maybe 2-3 times later we'll debate, and all of a sudden you're doxing me and shit. Maybe, but my experience so far hasn't been the case. If I just said, "Oh, well, based on what I've heard, nope, I won't engage with her," like I think that that's a mistake to do that sort of stuff. So, but I cannot more steadfastly say that the doxing of Nix was wrong and the assassination attempt was wrong, and fuck all the people that are acting like because they don't like him because he said mean things that he somehow deserves to die or deserves to live like this. That's bullshit. And I would say the same if it was people on the left that I don't care for. I would say that's ridiculous. This shouldn't be the world that we live in. And it shouldn't be that because you have opinions, even if people consider them heinous opinions, that sort of behavior is acceptable. So,
yeah, 100%.
But all right, Josie, I'm going to let you go. We got some other people on the line. But thanks so much for calling in. I hope everything's going well.
Hey, thank you for your take. I appreciate it.
All right.
Have a good one.
See you. All right. We got Garrett Link. And then Rome will probably be our last caller of the day because, believe it or not, I have a life. I got Christmas stuff going on the rest of the weekend. Garrett Link, can you hear me? Garrett.
Hello.
Hey, what's happening?
Not much. This is the first time I've called in on your show.
Cool. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So I was able to catch some of your debate yesterday with I'm not sure how to pronounce her name. Yasmin.
Jasmine, I think.
Like Jasmine.
Yeah, I think. I don't know.
Well, I caught some of it around her arguments regarding socioeconomic status and fatherlessness and things like that. And I was a little bit busy during that debate, but I noticed she was kind of jumping all over the place while she was making those claims, so it was kind of hard to track a lot of it.
Well, and a lot of the claims were based on studies, right? And what happens is, I have to admit two things. One, I hate to be the person that's like source. Most of the time, unless it's something that I have specific like hyper knowledge on, and I hear someone cite a study that I just think's blatantly untrue. If someone says it's a study, I'm like, well, let's assume that's true. Where does that take us, right? And so I was letting her get away with an awful lot. She kept saying, study say, study stay, study stay. And some of it was raising an eyebrow to me but the other thing that I have to admit is I don't do those styles of debates. This isn't something that I look into a lot. I've had the opportunity to go on bigger podcasts and to talk about this stuff, and it probably would grow my channel, but I just don't genuinely like talking about that stuff. It's not my forte. So I haven't done a lot of research into the studies specifically about, well, what are the differences, between in a same gender, two men that adopt a child, and what's their situation like on average for the child versus the biological parents versus a biological parent that then has a stepmom or dad move in, or versus an adoption from a single mother. I have general beliefs what I think's the case, but I haven't read those studies. So it does appear that she's jumping all over the place, and I'm sort of letting her get away with it because what I could have done is as soon as she said the first study, said, cite it, let's go through the study right now. And if you followed to the end, you see that's exactly what happened. She starts citing studies that are like, actually, there's like no connection. You would think that if people watch porn a lot, they're more likely to be addicted, but there's no connection. And then she cites a study that doesn't mention that whatsoever, and then sends another study that actually says the exact opposite. And so I would strongly suspect that if she misrepresented that study so egregiously, she's probably misrepresenting the other studies around that portion of the debate that you're talking about. But I think in general, her point she was trying to make is there's a bunch of other factors more than just growing up with your biological parents in a loving 2-parent household that are equally or more important to the success of the child. I don't think that's the case. I think that there certainly could be.
Yeah, I actually.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's fine. Go ahead.
So yeah, I actually wanted to give pushback on that claim that because. Well, the thing about fatherlessness, well, first off, she made the claim that socioeconomic status is a stronger correlate to how a child turns out than fatherlessness. But the fact is, and I have some studies I can send you after we're done chatting, but
yeah, put them in the Discord. Put them in the general Discord. I'm sure my audience would like to see them too. Yeah.
The fact is that's just not the case at all. In fact, socioeconomic status isn't even really a strong correlate at all to how an outcome or the outcomes of a child. Like, I mean, you can look. It's not a correlate towards crime even. Like, you can look at.
That surprises me. That surprises me. And let me say why real quick. Let me say why real quick. For 2 reasons, right? And it's actually not direct, it's more tertiary reasons, right? The one's more direct, that I would assume if you have lower socioeconomic status, that might mean that you have less access to nutrition, to education opportunities, and to, things of that nature, right? And so that would seem to the physical health of the child possibly could be less good. But the other reason was I would guess that in families that have troubles financially, it's not the financial troubles that's making the kid have a worse situation. It's that it makes conflict more likely. Because in situations I've known a lot of families where the husband and the wife really start fighting a lot when there are financial troubles. When things are going swimmingly and all the bills could be paid and things like that, great relationship. But the stressors of we don't know how to pay the mortgage this month, our car broke down and we can't get it fixed. A lot of times human nature is that then you're stressed out about that and that leads to more conflict. And I would guess then homes of a certain socioeconomic status would be more likely to have conflict in the home and therefore more likely to have negative outcomes for the child. However, the caveat to this is it's like the studies on economic status and happiness. There's a threshold where it inverts. It doesn't matter anymore. So, for example, there are people that say, like, money makes you happy. That's not true. The studies are pretty stark on this. What happens is there is a certain level that you're very unhappy if you don't have money. But that's because you're, like, homeless and you can't afford food and you can't afford rent and you can't afford a car. And yes, reaching that mark where you have enough money to do those things absolutely is important to your happiness. But after that, it actually inverses. And so once you start to get like, okay, I got the 50,000, the 60,000, 70, whatever that number may be, all of a sudden you get up to 1 million a year, 2 million a year, and the happiness chart goes down for those people. So it's not directly correlative of, oh, you have huge money, you're hugely happy. It actually doesn't, but you do have to reach that certain level. And I would guess that the same would be true of sort of well-being of children. I would guess in the poorest of families that can't afford food, that can't afford housing, that those kids are probably doing less well off, in part because there's a lot of conflict occurring in that family. But once you get to a certain point that those things aren't, I don't think that the millionaire has happier, better kids, more well-adjusted kids than the person who's making $70,000 a year. In fact, it may be the opposite because the kids become spoiled and focus on money is more important than focus on family. I don't know, but that was just the caveat I wanted to say.
Yeah, so it's actually pretty interesting. You brought up like conflicts in the family. So this would be, I don't have a whole bunch of data to support this. This is pretty anecdotal, just this one caveat, but I would say that the nature of like conflicts in the family are just a little bit different when you're looking at socioeconomic families, like different socioeconomic status. So like the rich people are going to have different conflicts. They actually may have just as much financial conflicts, but it would be more like heavy business related, or like you're working too much, not spending time with the kids. That actually is a really common problem. I could probably find.
I would
someday
suspect that's true, but what I'm saying is, right, there is yes, I think that would match up with the happiness studies and the correlation, but there's a sweet spot. Like if you're a mom and dad who's literally living under a blanket on the street with your kid, there's probably going to be a lot of conflict, right? But I do agree with you that I think once you reach a certain point, then yes, that conflict, that we've met that measure for the bare minimum of, okay, this is good, we're not having fights over money and stuff like that. And then probably as you go higher up that bracket, you start to see more money, more problems, right? You start to see people fighting over money. That probably me and my wife that live paycheck to paycheck probably have far less fights about money than if we became billionaires. Then all of a sudden, well, now that's because that money becomes your primary focus and you're more focused on that than the family and you're more paranoid and etc. When you have more to lose, I guess, financially. And so it's more likely to be a topic of contention. So I agree with you in that sense. I just think that there's probably a minimum that you have to meet, that it's a certain point, if you're very poor, it probably makes conflict more likely.
Yeah, I would say that's probably true. Like desperate poverty is obviously going to lead to crime, but like poverty in and of itself. So like if you compare the 50s to today, I mean, there was way more desperate poverty. Like I think something like 10% of the population didn't even have access to refrigeration and just like basic hygiene amenities and things like that. And yet the crime rate is much higher today than it was in the 1950s.
Yeah,
so,
she tried to claim the opposite, and I don't know. You're probably right. She claimed the opposite. I didn't call her out on it, but she made this claim that like by basically every metric, crime, all sorts of stuff, kids are doing better. And the only one that I know that's blatantly false for is like mental health of children, right? Like
she made a lot of claims that were just the opposite. So, like, she claimed a no-fault divorce led to a decrease in domestic abuse. This is just not true in any – that doesn't even pet the head of a truth claim. In fact, it blew out of control after that. And then I also have others because, like, a lot of people will counter and say, oh, well, that's because, they were reporting more. But I have all sorts of studies that I can send that show that unmarried women are way less likely to report domestic violence than married women.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that what you're illustrating is something. Now, again, I have to be fair. I have to attach. You could absolutely be 100% right, but so could have Jasmine, right? What I'm saying is this sort of shows what happens when you do a debate in a topic that you're not deeply knowledgeable on, right? Like, and so what happens is I'm muddling's not the right word. I'm going through the debate based on things that I know and things that I see with logical problems with what the advocacy is of the person that I'm talking with. So a lot of these claims, because I don't know that they're incorrect, I might suspect them, I'm not calling them out. But when the debate became interesting for me was when she basically, if you really break it down, and you tell me if you think this is fair or not based on what you saw, her claim is, forget about the legality of no-fault divorce, forget about all of that. Her claim's basically, we would be better off to encourage more divorces. And my claim is, we should make divorce more shameful. That's basically the crux of our debate. And so, all of the studies and this, that, and the other, like, for me, all of what you're saying, had I had access to this information, and you're correct, it would have been certainly beneficial in the debate to bring up, actually you're wrong, actually you're wrong, actually you're wrong. But I think what I was trying to do, because I didn't have access to that, was to point out how her worldview was inconsistent and actually made things, for example, a world where we glamorize and say divorce should be more easily acceptable, and it's human nature to have conflict, and it's human nature to leave after that conflict, and it's human nature to be serial monogamous. It makes the sorts of conflicts that she's saying are bad for children more likely because it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It makes sacrificing for the good of the child less likely. And it makes divorce more likely, which is on net worse for the child than the parents happily staying together. So I agree. Like I think that it's nice to talk to someone like you that's like, actually, she's just flat out wrong. But I didn't know she was flat out wrong. And so I tried to do the best with the access to information that I have. And I hope that I represented my side well with where I thought, even with my limited information, that I was able to prove why her system sucked.
You still looked good in the debate from what I saw, just because she was just kind of gish galloping all over the place. So I understand it would have been difficult to track a lot of her claims too. If she was making so many at once, it was kind of probably overwhelming. But the one point that I did want to hone in on, the one specific one, was just the one where she claimed that socioeconomic status is a bigger predictor of how children turn out than fatherlessness, and this really this one is the more egregious claim I think that she made, because fatherlessness is actually just like universally. I mean, you can look at any country and any socioeconomic status bracket. The fatherless children in those demographics and sub-demographics are more likely to grow up and commit crime and do drugs and things like that across the board.
Yeah, from what I've read, like I always read, there's 4 things I always read that they say if you accomplish these 4 things, your chances of like living a life where you don't end up in prison, where you don't end up homeless, blah, blah. And it's like, let me see what they are. It's having a 2-parent household, graduating high school, being fully employed, and I forget what the 4th one is, but the number one thing is having a 2-parent household, having a father in your life. That's now in my limited research of this is what everything was saying. And this is why I brought up the Moynihan report in the 60s, looking specifically at black Americans, that Democrats thought it was a crisis that 25% of blacks were being born out of wedlock, because they implicitly knew how bad that was for society and how bad that was for those children. And now the number is 75%. And so the idea, it seems counterintuitive based on me knowing that it's like, oh no, the science has changed and now actually fatherlessness doesn't really matter and actually it's all about money. That seems egregious. It seems wrong.
The point about black Americans is actually pretty good. Like just the statistics around them pretty much disprove her point, because the socioeconomic status of black Americans has improved drastically compared to what it was in the 50s and 60s, and yet their crime rates and all of that have skyrocketed.
Yeah, so. Well, hey, I appreciate it, and feel free to put any of those links. I would talk with you more, but I got 2 more callers, I think, on the line, and I have to get going at some point. But put those in in the Discord, in the general area, and then I'll try to look at those, and hopefully the rest of my audience could look at them as well. But I really appreciate it.
Yep, thanks.
Thanks so much, Garrett. All right.
Yep.
I know I said Rome was next, but Raceland was in here first, I believe. Raceland, what's happening? And then we'll get to Rome. Sorry, I'm sort of rushing here, everyone, but can you hear me, Raceland?
Hello.
Hey, what's happening?
Hey, sorry, I wasn't expecting to be pulled in. I thought you were gonna pull in the other guy
Rome
first,
guy,
but
yeah.
I was just I wanted to start. I just wanted to ask, like, how much time do you think you'd be willing to spend on a topic? Because I wanted to pick up where we left off last time, but I think it's just going to take too much time.
I'd maybe have 10 minutes for you and then 10 minutes for the other caller. Try to be done by 12:30. It would probably be maybe we do 15 minutes.
Okay. Okay, I'll just go a different direction then. I'm wondering, because you were talking a little bit about Israel. I'm wondering, what do you think the I guess proper way to, like, what do you hope Trump does around that conflict?
Stay out of it completely. Stop funding Israel and stop funding Palestine. Let Israel do what they'll do. That's what I would prefer. The problem is go ahead.
What would you say to the people that would argue against that and say that, like, well, Israel's our ally and we're there a foothold in the Middle East and Israel's like super important?
The problem is, even if it's true that we should be sort of this world police and involved in settling conflicts and helping with our allies, this and that, even if a world where there is a superpower doing that stuff is true, we have shown in our country that the people that make those decisions are incapable of doing so either competently or without corruption. We could see what they did in Libya. We could see what they did in Iraq. We could see what they did in Afghanistan. We could see what they did in Syria. And so the fact that we have to continue to trust these people that are funding organizations like Hezbollah, Iran, Hamas, Palestine, while simultaneously funding Israel, so we perpetually fund both sides of the conflict and say, well, we have to continue to do it, is nonsensical. Instead, what we should do is try to proffer a peaceful solution and say that, look, we are going to say that we will do our best to be mediators, to sit down to try to get a solution that's peaceful. However, we understand this is thousands of years conflict, that there's religious beef here, there's all sorts of beef that we don't understand, and so we're going to stay out of it. Israel are big boys. Israel supposedly has the conventional capabilities to beat the shit out of Hamas. So they don't need us there to help them beat Hamas. They could do it on their own. If they do it in such a way that it causes such an international uproar that other countries decide to get involved, then maybe the United States pursues diplomatic solutions to try to prevent those other countries from escalating or getting involved. Or maybe it will make Israel more likely to have a resolution that wouldn't encourage those other countries to get involved, because they know that they could do whatever they want now, because the United States will be backing them no matter what, whatever they do from now to perpetuity. So I would say it's all fine and dandy that Israel's our ally. I understand Israel being really pissed off about the situation. I also understand Palestinians being really pissed off about the situation. I'm not going to delve into who started what. Is it genocide? Is it too far? Whatever. I understand both sides being pissed about it. What I know is my country fails the people of this country miserably under the auspices of, but we have to be the world police and we have to protect our allies and we have to do this and that, and then routinely make the very situations that they're saying we have to be involved in worse, like they do in Syria, like they did in Afghanistan, like they do in Iraq, like they do in Libya, and I'm tired of it. So I would tell those people, sorry, it's not my fault that we need to end this disastrous policy. It's the fault of people like you that cheered on this disastrous foreign policy for 30 years, seeing how corrupt and incompetent it was over and over again. Should have done something when it mattered.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I actually think that Trump doesn't get enough credit for this in his first term with the Abraham Accords and the Iran sanctions. I think a peaceful Middle East could have been achieved potentially with the Iran sanctions and the Abraham Accords, and I don't think people talk about it enough.
Yeah, I mean, and listen, one advantage to being a superpower is, like, if you look at a country like Ukraine or a country like Israel, right? Israel less than Ukraine, but you'll get what I'm saying here, that seemingly are massively reliant on U.S. funds going in to keep their militaristic operations going. If that funding is pulled, it makes peaceful resolution a better option for those countries. If Ukraine knows, like, oh shit, we're not getting this monies anymore, they're going to have to say, well, we need to negotiate. Now, I understand a lot of people are pissed about that. But in the position of Israel, the difference is Ukraine's negotiating from a position of weakness. Israel's negotiating from a position of strength, right? And if their argument is, well, we're incapable of targeted attacks on Hamas leadership or taking out Hamas unless the United States backs, is anyone making that argument? I'm unaware of anyone making it. I'm unaware of anybody in the Israeli government making that argument. That is the argument that Zelensky's making, and I understand why Zelensky's making that argument, because it's objectively true. If the United States isn't funding them, they're probably out of the fight. But no one seems to be making that claim with Israel. So instead I say, okay, let Israel be the big dog. You're pissed off, you could do it, we won't get in your way. You want to take care of shit in the way you want, so be it. But we don't have to fund it. That's on you. That's how I look at it. Instead, we're funding it, and then we're putting flotillas in Palestine that cost millions of dollars that are then getting attacked, that never get used, and we're sending humanitarian aid that's then being used by Hamas and blah, 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 blah. Like, it makes no sense. We're funding both sides of it. So in that situation, if I'm president, if I'm Trump, and Netanyahu's like, I'd say, hey, man, you do what you got to do. We're not going to sanction you, whatever. You feel like you were attacked. You want to take out these terrorists. More power to you. We're not going to stand in your way, but we ain't sending you money. Good luck. Right? And then they'll do what they're going to do. And if they go too far and they say, well, fuck it, we're going to bomb Tehran, and Iran says, okay, now we're in a fight with Israel. Okay. Maybe Israel's less likely to do that. They're more likely to have a targeted approach. Because right now, maybe Israel thinks, well, we don't give a shit. What's Iran going to do to us? The United States got our back. They'll bomb the shit out of them if they attack us. I don't know. So, I mean, I understand that I might not have the most sophisticated take on this sort of stuff, but how many times am I going to get my leg pissed on and told that it's raining before I say, you know what, I don't think this is rain. You know, that's how I feel about the whole situation.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The other thing I wanted to bring up, this kind of relates to the other, like the topic we were on the other day, is I see people completely losing faith in the institutions, and even on the left, you see people losing faith in like corporations and the government and things like that. But I think also coming with this problem is that people are also losing faith in other people. I've seen you kind of hint at this when we were having the conversation the other day. I've seen, the leftists hint at this, or just actually say it, like they think the majority of the population is stupid and shouldn't have a voice. And I don't really like the direction that we're going, because I think it's eventually going to lead to like some sort of like elitist society.
No, okay. So when you say you heard me give direction, would this be when I was talking about direct democracy? If 90% of the people vote against my right to free speech, doesn't matter?
No, so we were having a conversation. I said the other day, I said that I think the solution to a lot of these problems is going to be like sunlight is the best disinfectant. And you were saying that, well, that didn't work in 2020. People just
people need to be held accountable for the corruption at these institutions. That doesn't imply that people are stupid. One of my favorite movie quotes, it's so cheesy, from the original Men in Black, right? Have you ever seen that movie?
I have.
Yeah. Okay, so there's this scene where they're sitting on a park bench. Tommy Lee Jones and Will Smith are sitting on a park bench, and he basically tells Will Smith, look, if you want to join our group, you got to give up your entire life. You'll cease to exist. And Will Smith's like, having this conversation with him. And Will basically makes this point, like, people will figure it out. And Tommy Lee Jones says something effective, a person is smart, but people are dumb, fearful animals, and you know it. And that's true. Individuals are smart. But as a collective, it's easy to manipulate large groups of people. It is. And like, if you look at Edward Bernays and the entire history of the advertising, like, they got it down to a science, how to manipulate large groups of people. And that doesn't mean that everybody in that group's stupid. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that psychologically it's easy to manipulate people like that. And so look at how this would work. My neighbor's a smart dude. His job now, he's a veteran. He served our country in Afghanistan. He has a job that's sort of a blue-collar job, right? He's got a family. Good guy. He doesn't follow politics like me. He's a good guy. He happens to be a Trump supporter, Republican. He's actually more involved in local politics. This guy's like a firebrand at the local school board meetings and stuff, right? He isn't remotely understanding the corruption of something like Russiagate or the Burisma scandal. It's been made public. All the information's out there for him to see, but he doesn't get it. And it's not because he's not smart enough to get it. It's because he's providing for his family. It's because he's going to school board meetings. It's because he has priorities that he can see directly in front of his face that are more important than delving into these sorts of other things. And that's how most Americans feel. Unless it directly impacts them in some way where they could tangibly see the results, they may suspect like 20-something% of it. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking. This is easy. Would you agree with this? Like, congressional approval ratings are remarkably low. Like, the approval of Congress is something like 20-something%, right?
Yeah.
Yet incumbents almost always win. How can that be? Everybody, you ask an individual, you're like, what do you think of Congress? They suck. They don't give a shit about us. It's just a bunch of people protecting their own interests. They forget where they came from, and I'm in rural Pennsylvania. They don't care anymore. All of a sudden, they're riding in limos in D.C., going to fancy cocktail parties. Who are you voting for? Same guy. It's not that they're stupid. It's that the information that they're taking is the most important, and the things that prioritize their lives. It's not the things that we're talking about, the access to corruption, etc., or the corruption that occurred or whatever. So the corruption, it's all, the sunlight's out there, right? We see it. They know it. My neighbor knows, like, yeah, it's bullshit. Half these cases against Trump is absolutely bullshit. But what's he going to do about it? What? He's like, I'll vote for Trump. Okay? What do we expect him to do? Pitchforks? You going to show up on January 6th? No. He's going to keep going to work. And he's going to say, that sucks. Hope Trump wins. Okay, life goes on. Now, there are unique times where it pierces through that. And one of those times was the pandemic, right? Everybody knew around here that government's corrupt, screw them. But they didn't really want to talk about politics. And when you said, well, look at this situation. If I said, look at this Burisma situation, they go, yeah, that looks shitty. Biden's, man, they're shitty. But they ultimately wouldn't change how they would go about their life. The pandemic changed that. Because all of a sudden you saw people saying, wait a minute, I can't go to work? I'm non-essential? But these people could go out and riot? What the fuck is this? That triggered people. That was something that, and it's because the people were never dumb. It's just that they didn't have a reason to prioritize that stuff because it wasn't directly affecting their life. Once people can't afford meals, once they're told that they're non-essential and they can't go to work, once they're told that they can't go visit their parents in the nursing home, now it's directly affecting their life. It's not that all of a sudden they got smarter. It's not that they now realize that there was corruption, but previously they didn't suspect it. It's because they prioritized things, and the things that we're talking about, general corruption, they didn't give a shit. Everybody knows Bill Clinton lied about getting that BJ. No one gives a shit. It's corrupt. They covered up the fact that they knew he was lying and this, that, and the other, but no one gave a shit. The economy was going pretty good. Okay, whatever. Everybody knows well, not everybody, but so many people know how corrupt the FBI's investigations into Trump and all these investigations into Trump, but how does that affect them and their family? Yeah, that sucks. Someone should do something about it. And as long as that mentality persists until it directly affects them, it has nothing to do with intelligence. I understand the decision. In many ways, I'm the dumb one. What am I sitting here doing, talking about? What is my chance to influence any of this shit? Zero, zilch, almost nothing. And yet I'm doing 24-hour live streams. And yet I'm investing all this time into this stuff. Is my neighbor dumber than me because he might not know as many of the specifics, even though he suspects there's a corruption, but he's working overtime to provide for his family? Or he's actually going out and having fun with it? I don't think so. I think he's smarter than me. So it's not that I've lost faith in people that it's like, oh, I think they're all stupid. It's that I think because of the way that this sort of corruption occurs, people don't see it as directly affecting their personal life, so they don't take an interest in it. They heavily suspect that the whole game's rigged, but they don't care as long as their shit keeps getting done and their family. And you might say, well, that's stupid in the grand scheme of things. And maybe, but it has nothing to do with these people's direct intelligence. That's what I mean when I say, and that we need to have accountability for the people that engaged in the corruption, because my neighbor just knowing, yeah, it's corrupt, that doesn't really change anything.
I mean, don't you think it will change his voting decision?
Will it? For example, I know people that are Democrats that'll say, yeah, these investigations of Trump was corrupt, but I'm still voting Democrat. Why? Well, because there are other issues that are more important to me. I happen to think corruption's the biggest issue, but other people disagree. How many people, for example, do you think would say, if their number one issue was abortion, and you convinced them that the system was corrupt against Trump, would say, oh, okay, then I'll vote for Trump? They would say, well, that sucks, but I'm still going to vote for Democrats because I think Trump's against abortion. And abortion's my number one issue. You have to make people care, not just believe that there's corruption, but care more about the corruption. And how do you make people care more about that? Well, it's difficult because corruption, that's not something that directly smacks you right in the face, like saying you can't go to work. That directly affects you. Or gas prices doubled. I'll ask you, if you thought, this is a hypothetical, right? And it might sound ridiculous, but maybe it'll help illustrate the point to you. If we said going into the election, Trump versus Kamala, and we'll start under the assumption that we think the entire FBI efforts to go after Trump were corrupt. And if I told you, you have a choice, or more importantly, the Americans have a choice. Choice one would be to vote for Trump and all of the corruption will be outed and these people will be shamed. No one will get arrested, but they'll all be outed and shamed. But gas prices double. Or you vote for Kamala and gas prices stay the same, but the corruption's never outed. How do you think the American people would vote? What do you think their priority would be?
I think it this question's kind of hard to answer because I guess it depend on how people think about the corruption and how it will affect them in the future, like after the corruption is
That's
gone.
right, it does, but how do you suspect they would think about it? What do you think the average person would say? I'm going to take the cheaper gas prices. That's what they'd say, and you know it. Not everyone, but that's what most people would say. And you can't blame them for that. If you're living paycheck to paycheck, of course. You might not like the corruption, but you're like, well, shit, I can't afford this. People prioritize different things. Sometimes we might think the reason that they prioritize things is stupid, but maybe we're stupid. You know, and it is what it is, and it's a difficult sell for me to convince to someone why giving massive surveillance powers to an institution like the FBI that's putting their thumb on the scale has grievous ramifications for the directions of our country going 50 years down the road. When they're like, I can't afford my mortgage. It's difficult for them to process. Now, it may be that they still end up voting for the side that I want because they think that side will be better for the issue that they care about, their mortgage. And I think that's largely what happened. But what percent, how do you think that corruption was the number one reason Trump won? I don't. I don't think it's close.
I thought they did a survey that said most people's top issue was being a threat to democracy or something.
There was
I could be misciting.
So there was an NBC poll that came out the day of the election that said exit polling suggested that democracy was the top issue. But the problem with that is most of the people that said that actually voted against Trump, right? And that exit poll was a huge outlier. Most of the other exit polls showed that immigration and the economy were the top two issues by a large majority. And
okay.
And
yeah,
that's
well,
why that's and look, from a weird perspective, what was I saying? I wanted Trump and them to be out there talking about corruption all the time. But the easiest sell to the American people to win the election was immigration, the economy, foreign policy. And that's what I said over and over when I did these debates. I said, what you'll see is every time I do one of these debates, you'll see the left say, but January 6th, but democracy, but fascism, but Project 2025, because they know if the election is a referendum on the record of the Biden-Harris administration on the economy, immigration, and foreign policy versus the record of the Trump administration on those three issues, Trump wins running away. And that's exactly what happened. And so Trump's team was smart to focus on those three issues. Whereas if they would have if they're like me and they're debating the minutia of Burisma, I think most people tune out. They're like, who's going to help my paycheck? Who's going to help the border crisis? Who's going to make the world more peaceful? So for me, what I'm saying is, given all of that, I think that we've already seen since 2018, 2019, evidence of the FBI putting their thumb on the scale and corruptly going after Trump has been pretty evident, and I think it's become more and more evident as time's gone on. Yet there haven't been significant changes. And so for me, there won't be changes because if there's a very good chance that we got this bubble blowing with all this debt, right? It's going to burst at some point. Yeah. The economy's going to hit the shitter. It might not be in Trump's 4-year term. It might be after. But inevitably, it's going to happen. And if we just say, well, you know what outing corruption will do? It'll ensure that the side that's corrupt will never win again. I don't think so. I think that if another pandemic hits, if there's an economic crisis, if there's a big war and the party in power gets blamed, people aren't going to be thinking about corruption. And then we're back to square one. Okay, now the group that was corrupt, there were no consequences. Now they're back in power. What do you think they're going to do? They're going to just stop the corruption? Of course not. The corruption won't stop until people are held accountable. And it has nothing to do with me thinking people are stupid. It has with me understanding the reality that people are trying to focus on the things that most directly impact their life when they make decisions about voting and their beliefs in politics. And corruption is difficult to articulate to people as to why that's so important in affecting their day-to-day life. Grocery prices, easy. Trans agenda, teaching your kids at school, easy. Immigration crisis, easy. Trying to convince how the FBI was intentionally going after Trump and intentionally protecting Hillary, Biden, etc., very difficult. That's my feeling on it.
Yeah, and well, I don't want to have too much time here, but I just think that along with the skepticism of the institutions is coming also with the skepticism of the public, whether it be through information or intelligence, whatever you want to say. But I think that's,
just one last thing I'll say about it. Like, it depends on what you mean skepticism. Like, for example, I'm skeptical that I think that there's huge members of the public or huge proportions of the public that are okay with political violence. Is that unwarranted skepticism?
right, but I don't think they should not be able to say their views out loud. I
Oh,
think
no, I'm
allowed.
and I've never suggested that, but I don't know what you mean
Right.
about distrust of it's a very vague concept. It seemed like when you were saying with distrust of institutions comes distrust of other people, and it seemed like what you were saying was a competency issue. And so that's what I was focused on. But if it's beyond that, if it's saying I distrust them, that they are looking out for my best interest. That's true. I do distrust a lot of them. And I think with good reason. I think the pandemic proved that. We had, damn near 30% of Democrats said that my child should be removed from my house if I didn't take the shot that they wanted. 50% thought that I should have been locked in my home. And you could say, well, those are polls. Should we trust them? Yeah, maybe those specific numbers aren't true, but directionally they're true. They certainly are. And it's brought out the worst in people. I hope cooler heads prevail. But the last thing I'll say about it is you're right. There are problems that come with the distrusting of institutions. And those problems actually could balloon out in ways that maybe we didn't initially see or anticipate. Whose fault's that, though? It's not my fault for distrusting the institution. It's the institution's fault for being distrustworthy. What am I supposed to do? Continue to pretend that they're trustworthy because I'm worried about the implications of what we would expect of other things if I see the truth that these places are corrupt and incompetent? I totally disagree. Just like I say about the mainstream media all the time. When you watch the press correspondent awards and all of that stuff, they always give these glowing speeches about the importance of the fourth estate, the press. We speak truth to power, and it's so important, and our founding fathers and the rich tradition of journalism and how important it is, and to be the voice of the people. They're right. They are absolutely correct. That is immensely important, but we don't have it, which makes it all the more pity. It is so important to have a powerful, competent, fair legal system, Department of Justice, but we don't have it. But it is important, but we don't have it. And so with me being we need to get back on track. We need to do things to make these institutions trustworthy again. And the only way that could occur is for accountability to occur. You can't just be well, okay, we all know now they're untrustworthy. Now it'll change. Because would you trust it?
I mean, we can have a more in-depth conversation about this because we'd have to get into a lot of other things.
I suppose, but
yeah,
the analogy I would
think,
say, if you ask me to house sit and I steal from you, and then you ask me to house sit again and I steal from you, and you ask me again and I steal from you, and each time you call the cops and they say, well, now you know, we're not going to punish him. Do you think I'm going to change when I house sit for you again? Now it's been made.
I think if other people knew about this person that was stealing when house sitting, they probably wouldn't hire the person. Not that penalty shouldn't be, put on the person, but I'm saying most likely,
but I'm still going to steal until the
person.
consequences occurs. I'm still going to steal. There has to be some form of consequence, and if I'm still getting hired other places, then there's no consequence. And you can't deny that in this analogy, this is exactly what's happened. For example, the FBI is still in power, right? What's the consequence?
We voted in Trump.
So?
I mean,
what's that changed so far? What's that changed so far?
I mean, so far nothing, but we do see Kash Patel is going to be the director of the
we'll
FBI.
See. Right, and it'll only matter if there's consequences for the FBI. If Kash Patel goes in there and says, well, you know what? We're not going to fire anyone. We're not going to hold anyone accountable. Nope. We're just going to say, look what they did that was bad. They're all still here, but look what they did that was bad. You think they're going to change?
Well,
No.
firing them and using the DOJ as essentially a tool to hold these people accountable is two different things. And I'm
Why
not saying it's not
why should
warranted in
criminals
some
not be
cases.
held accountable by the DOJ?
I'm not saying they shouldn't. I'm saying that they're like I said, we really have to have a
We
longer
will
conversation
talk
this,
about
which
it.
is why
I would
asked
say
at the
that if
beginning.
people abuse their office for political gain to investigate people in a corrupt manner, then they should be held morally. They should be held legally accountable, and strategically they should be held legally accountable. And I don't see where the moral failing is in holding those people criminally accountable. And I don't think that shows that I have a distrust in thinking people aren't smart or anything like that.
Okay, yeah, and the last thing I'll say about this is, for now, is just that when I say we holding these people accountable would be showing the public their actions, and your response is that you don't think the public would hold them accountable, it is kind of hinting at a distrust of the American people.
It's not, because the people won't hold them accountable because they have other priorities, which I totally respect. Do you have a family?
Okay, yeah.
Do you have a family?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. If you had to choose between quitting your job and going and protesting every day about the corruption of the FBI and your family no longer being able to live in your current place, or to continue to work, which one would you choose?
Obviously, my family.
Does that mean I'm distrusting of you? I totally understand why you would make that choice. That's what I'm saying. I understand why my neighbor's like, dude, I'm not going to drop everything to, quote, hold corrupt people accountable. And again, the proof's in the pudding. If we accept that the numbers are even reasonably close, that huge swaths of this country think that Congress is inept or corrupt, and yet they continue to elect the same people, it shows that... how do you explain that? What's your explanation?
Why do these corrupt people keep getting elected? Is that the question?
If 80% of this country roughly says, we think Congress is worthless, they're corrupt, they're incompetent, and yet they keep re-electing the same people, how do you explain that?
I think part of the problem is we have kind of a two-party system and the whole, the entirety of the two-party system is corrupt at this point.
Okay, well, that, we all know that, so why hasn't it changed? Because it seems to be you're suggesting sunlight, once people know that the two-party system's corrupt, then it'll change. Okay, but it hasn't. And people know that, so now what?
I don't think people actually do know that for the
numbers,
most part.
The numbers seem to suggest you're incorrect. Polling suggests that approval ratings of Congress is at 23%. So at least 3/4 of the country think Congress sucks, yet overwhelmingly, they're still going out and voting for their same person.
But this is why I would say that Trump got elected, because and the same reason he got elected the first time, talking about joining the swamp, he didn't do it, but this time around he says he's going to do better. So I think that's a major.
So there has
reason
to
why
be
he got
accountability.
elected.
When he was there in the first 4 years, he didn't drain the swamp. There were no consequences, and then he lost, and then he went through lawfare, and then people were thrown in prison, and blah 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 blah, and we ended up here. Now there's no guarantee that if Trump does the same thing he did again, and there is no accountability, that it'll be any different in 2028. What if let's say it keeps going tit for tat. No accountability again this time, then 2028, Democrats win. Then they do it again. They weaponize again. Then 2032, Republicans win because they did it. But no accountability. Then 2036, well, Democrats win again and they do it again. Are we saying, oh, that proves that sunlight's the best disinfectant, it solved it, because half the time now, Democrats aren't in power. So that's good enough. No need for accountability because people punish them half the time. Of course not.
My main concern is that if the accountability primarily comes from the justice system, we're going to have a system where each party that comes into power just uses the justice system.
We have that system right now. It's just one party does it. And so this was similar to the discussion I had to the person the other day. Now, I refuse to listen to someone say they should be allowed to take you down by any means possible, and they'll win half the time and they'll go full brunt on you. But when you're there, you don't do that. And I'm not suggesting doing that. I'm not suggesting illegal FISA warrants. I'm saying guy at the FBI is working with Democrats to say, how can we screw over Trump to win the election? Guy at the FBI deserves to be held legally accountable for that. You're saying, no, he doesn't. Because if we hold him legally accountable, well, then the Democrats might weaponize the justice system, which they're going to do inevitably. Can you explain to me why in that situation, that guy at the FBI shouldn't be held accountable by the DOJ?
Well, like I said, I think there are certainly instances where people need to be held accountable, but I just don't want us to like kind of stoop to their level. And I think
I disagree. I'm uninterested. I will say I like talking to you. I'm so uninterested in this argument. I don't give a shit. It's so dumb. One, I'm not saying stoop to their level. I'm not saying that we should get illegal FISA warrants and things like that. Second, I'm so unpersuaded, and I know you well enough that I don't think this is the cause. But you're literally making the same argument that the worst people make, and that it's designed to intentionally sabotage ever having any reform, which is to say, hey, when they do it, we could wag our finger and say, don't do that. And then when we're there, we say, but we won't do that. And then when they get back in, we'll wag our finger even harder next time. But whatever we do, we can't hold people accountable. I'm sorry. Unpersuaded to the max. I can't tell you. Like, I find your argument as unpersuasive as my son's argument that he wants that fifth cookie. I just don't give a shit. I don't even care to
hold these people accountable, like through the like.
It didn't work. Did it work? Did it work in 2020?
A lot of the information out there was being suppressed.
Okay, like, what's the chance that it won't be suppressed again?
I think it's
let's say
if
if Trump holds people accountable. If Trump says, wait a minute, isn't Trump suggesting things like, for example, Trump said this the other day, wow, it looks like Liz Cheney broke the law. It looks like there should be a criminal investigation. So if he does that, yes, you're right. If Trump follows through on his promises and Kash Patel follows through on his promises and says there will be criminal consequences for the people that engage in criminal behavior, I agree. If that sort of stuff happened, we'd start to see possibly the pendulum begin to swing the other way. You're saying that's a bad idea.
I'm saying... I get, like I said, I guess we would just have to get into like the nuance of my argument, because I think you're kind of misunderstanding me a little bit. I'm not saying
that might be true, but and again, it's like this caller the other day. What it is you're like, oh, you're saying that Trump should get FISA warrants to spy on his opponents. He should do all this evil shit, and he should be sitting there every day going, who's next? Nancy Pelosi, investigate her every way possible. FISA warrants right now. Lock her up. Drag her out of her house right now. Do it. Do it right now. And you're like, whoa, let's not do that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that I don't even give a shit about people like Hillary Clinton, Nancy Pelosi, etc. I'm saying the people in the institutions of the FBI, of the CIA, of the DOJ, the corrupt people that knowingly broke the law by exploiting their positions of power to politically go after people that they didn't like, need to be held accountable. That's what needs to happen. And what happens is, whether it be through a fundamental misunderstanding from people in the audience like you or that gentleman that called the other day, you then conflate. You're like, no tit for tat. I'm not suggesting a tit for tat. I am suggesting that these people should be held to the same standard that they sought to other people. That's what I'm suggesting when it comes to those people in those law enforcement. And I am saying that the best chance for that to occur, because we're going to see massive pushback by the entire Democrat, by the entire media. And when you're talking about suppression, guess what the narrative is going to be? And the polling will start to show, oh, when Trump's going after the FBI, people think that he's weaponizing the justice system. That's what's going on. And so the only way that that will change is if the people that are spreading that narrative suffer the same consequences that they wanted against other people, if they're criminals. So if Nancy Pelosi is insider trading, and she was cheering for every investigation into Trump's finances, and there's probable cause to investigate her, then fuck yes, investigate her. And the same is true of Joe Biden, the same is true of Hillary Clinton, and all of these people. And I am sick and fucking tired. I'm sorry, I don't dislike you as a person. I'm sick and fucking tired of the mealy-mouthed, middleman fucking bullshit, but let's not do what they did. Then start your own fucking third party and shine light and disinfectant and see how well you do. Until then, fuck you. I shouldn't be censored for YouTube. My friends shouldn't be languaged in solitary confinement. The people I support shouldn't have to worry about what they say online, shouldn't have to go to jail and have their lives ruined because of this bullshit corruption, while you say, but the important thing is to make sure that you don't do anything back to them. Fuck you. Fuck that mentality, and I don't give a shit that you think it'll be worse. I'm not going to continue to accept perpetual L after perpetual L just so I can claim, well, at least as I'm losing and my family's being locked up, I'm standing on a moral high ground. Fuck you. And if people find that message persuasive, by all means, start a third party, and I wish you well in winning those elections. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah,
I don't know what
like,
else to
like
say.
I said, I would be wanting to, like, if you ever have time to have a more in-depth conversation about this. But yeah, I appreciate you taking my call in. So.
Thank you. I do appreciate you calling in. I know I'm not directing that anger directly at you. You're the 500th person I've heard say this. It's so tiresome. So, all right. Thanks so much.
Yep. You have a good one.
Yep. That middleman guy, he called in the other day. Well, eventually, if you don't engage for the tit for tat, us in the middle will come to your side. Oh, did you see how bad the corruption was in 2020? Yep. Did you vote Republican? No. Did you vote in 2024? No. But eventually, if you just whatever you do, don't hold them criminally accountable. Don't hold the criminals criminally accountable. Don't do that. That would be a huge mistake. You just have to let them keep being criminals. But trust us, they'll just change. They'll change because all of us will eventually come to your side. Oh, we're not doing that, though. We're not coming to your side yet. But trust us, eventually it'll change. What a crock of shit. All right, last caller. Rome, Egypt. What's happening? It's starting to get a little fired up there at the end.
I was about to say, that was a Destiny level rant. How do you not already have 100,000?
Yeah, right.
Off that side?
Raceland's a really good guy, by the way.
Yeah,
that guy that was calling, he's a really good guy. I know I'm getting, but this is like literally, I hear this shit in my real life all the time. I don't understand, my
dad does it too.
Like, for me, it'd be one thing if I'm out there saying, no matter what, take down Nancy Pelosi. I'm not saying that.
Asking for 30 FISA warrants on Joe Biden.
Yeah, I'm not asking for that shit. Like, I just, like, and I don't care. Well, we have to be careful. It's so fucking ludicrous, right? It's ludicrous. Like, imagine that you're like a jewelry store. I heard about this story one time where there was this guy that ran a jewelry store in the inner city. Like, and he kept getting robbed over and over. And he ended up, like, shooting and killing 5 robbers, which is incredible. And, like, you would think
that's a lot of robbers.
Yeah, you would think that the reputation would eventually, after, like, the third person broke in and he killed them, don't you think at some point they'd be like, let's go to a different jewelry store? Like, why did you find this guy? But imagine that you see that, and you see this guy, like, he gets robbed and he gets beaten to near death. And then he gets robbed again and he gets beaten to near death. And then he gets robbed again and he gets beaten to near death. And he's like, you know what, I'm going to get a gun to arm myself and protect myself. And someone goes, well, now listen, the important thing is that we have to be careful. Make sure that you're not being too aggressive.
Okay,
you have to
you
make
can't
sure,
say this. This is a real argument I've seen leftists use. You can't.
I know,
people,
right?
They just want bread. It's all about bread. They need bread for their 2-year-old.
Well, but what I'm saying is, at some point, you just have to say, I don't give a shit about your mealy mouth bullshit. The time for that sort of stuff is well in the future or well in the past. Not right now where there's a crisis. No, unpersuaded. I'm unpersuaded to say, well, you're on the cusp of actually making legitimate changes, but don't go too far. Don't do it. Yes, the other side wants to weaponize all of these legal systems to go after you, but instead of prioritizing actually having accountability, you have to make sure, fuck that. Fuck that. How about if we go too far, you can tell us 4 years from now, hey, you went too far, and I'll say, okay, we'll look back on that. How about that? How's that sound? I'm just, and again, it would be different. I can understand that argument if I'm out here saying, now's the time for FISA warrants against everyone. I'm not saying that. So when even I say that, and repeatedly people are like, whoa, this is too far. You're losing faith in the American people because instead of holding people accountable, we just need to have sunlight. Sunlight's the best disinfectant. That'll solve everything.
Well, the problem is sunlight is not a disinfectant for corruption. It's a disinfectant for bad worldviews. Because people see the bad worldview and they're like, oh, I don't want any part of this bad worldview. But for corruption, this is what I think you should have brought up with the thing. When an average person looks at the corruption of the government, they're not thinking, I don't care about this or this isn't important to me. They're thinking, what is me protesting going to do?
Well, that's just, but
it's not going to have an effect. Nobody's going to care, right?
What that caller would say is this: well, they'll all vote against the corruption. That's what they'll do. All of them.
Well, again, and then to your incumbent point, which I think you were leaving out the other side of this statistic as well. People have a low view of Congress as a whole. They generally have a high view of their particular representative.
That's right.
And that's why they vote incumbent.
That's right. That's what I was expecting to say. But that proves my point, right? Which is that you can understand as a whole, what do they call it? The Gell-Mann, this is sort of the inverse of that, which is this phenomenon where, let's say you're an engineer and you pick up the newspaper and you read, you believe everything in the newspaper.
I know what you're talking about.
Except the engineer story, where you're like, holy shit, this story's garbage because it's my area of expertise. But you still believe every other area that you're not an expert. It's similar here. You're like, I believe that this is corrupt, but my guy's good. Everyone else is like, but your guy's corrupt. Nope, my guy's good. And then you're like, but your guy's corrupt. And they're like, no, my guy's good. And everyone says that. So we know the general truth, but everyone's like, but not my specific one. My specific one's good. It's, and what happens is it's the same idea with corruption. You know, in general that there's corruption, but when it comes to the specific things at the micro level that you're looking at, the macro idea of there's corruption, and it doesn't affect the specifics of you as much. And
it depends on the kind of corruption, too.
Well, right. So the corruption with the pandemic, because it personally affected people's lives, is one thing, right? If there's corruption, for example, they're taking your land for eminent domain so they could sell it to the governor's fucking donor. That corruption affects you. That's going to piss you off. That's going to make that the central issue. Well, but if the corruption's just like they went after Trump and they protected Biden.
The eminent domain stuff was so that we could know what the Indians felt like. It was really to instill empathy in Americans.
A Yellowstone fan, huh?
No, fuck Yellowstone.
I've never watched one episode.
I haven't either, but I heard about the ending, and oh man.
I have this thing. It's terrible, right? I never watch shows until they're done. Right, so like way back in the day, like when Game of Thrones was in like season 2, all my friends were like, "Oh, dude, you gotta watch Game of Thrones. It's a badass show." And I was like, it'll probably be 5-6 seasons. When it ends, I'll watch it all, right? Because I'm the type of person, if I watch something as it comes out, I watch season 1 of it. By the time season 2 comes out, I'm like, wait a minute, what happened in season 1? Then I go back and I watch season 1 anyways to catch up to watch season. So I'm just like, and then what happens is all these shows suck by the end, and then I'm like, oh. Well, I don't want to watch Game of Thrones because everyone says the last season sucks. I don't want to watch Yellowstone because everyone says that it sucks in the last season. The only, one of the shows that I did the opposite, I watched the show Dexter each season as it was coming out, and the last season blew. So then I had a bunch of friends that I was like, I don't know. I mean, the first seasons were okay, but I thought the ending sucked. So I probably contributed to that as well. But yeah, I mean, I don't know shit about Yellowstone other than what people were saying about the ending, but I'm not surprised.
It's basically I don't know. I don't understand Hollywood anymore. I don't know if they thought that, hey, we'll make this kind of conservative show that like rails against vegans and environmentalism, and then the last episode we're gonna go full hardcore left. We're gonna give our ranch to the Indians. We're gonna tear everything down. It's gonna be a restoration, or whatever. Like, does this fool anyone? Does anyone watching this up to this point see this sudden shift in political tone and go, oh, I'm a Democrat?
Well, I will say, now I have to be honest, I have not watched the show, so I can't comment. And let me also put this caveat. I do think, although I think that like their wokeism's a problem in entertainment, etc., sometimes people go too far. I will agree with that. But I will say, I heard people saying that Yellowstone, even in the middle seasons, had been slowly transitioning to more of like a liberal mindset. That the characters, I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know, but that's what they. So it wasn't just like conservative values, conservative value, conservative value, conservative value, conservative value. Give the land to the Indians in the last episode. It was more like a gradual shift. And there is actually, now I'm not saying that's what happened, but there is intelligence in that, right? Because you have to understand that culture is more, politics is downstream of culture. And one of the ways that we could change cultural views is through entertainment. But no one's going to watch, like, if instead of Yellowstone, it's the same actors or whatever, and the plot is they're the first transgender ranch family. The Duttons are trans now, and Kevin Costner comes out in dress. How many people that love that show do you think are going to tune in? Not many, because they're going to be like, this is garbage. So if you have an audience of people that are traditional conservatives that you want to start to mold their cultural beliefs, you start out making characters they can identify with. And with cultural values that they identify with. And then you gradually have that change, right? Which subtly affects the views that people have, right? That's sort of the way you would go about it. You wouldn't have it be stark, right? Because
I get the idea. Hollywood just, I don't think they're smart enough with their message. I have never seen a show where I'm like, this is like a decently well-reasoned show, and then it like slowly, because I look for the slow introduction of like leftist values. It's never slow. It's always really obvious out of nowhere. Like Resident Alien, it was a pretty good show in the first season, and it's a pretty good show in the second season. But randomly in the 4th episode of the second season, they have it's like they had totally different writers not involved, and it was just all about feminism and the wage gap and all this for a whole episode, and then it went back to the normal quality of the show. It was like, I don't even know how to explain it.
But you pick up on it, but maybe other people don't.
Like,
maybe other people don't. They're like, oh, but it's just subtly put in there. It's not like you're not going to make the change start like for the whole time. Like, and if you do, that show usually fails. It doesn't achieve its message. So I understand why people do it. Actually, conservatives should do the opposite, right? Like,
we should ram anti. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I was telling my wife the other day, I was like, it's funny. You see all this like, blackwashing of characters. It's like, you have a white character in some Disney show.
Then whitewashing everything.
Right. Well, no, not even that. I was like, how come it doesn't happen with like sex? Right. So like, think of characters that you think are famous female characters. Let's change them to men. Let's see how. So like, instead of Mary Poppins, we could have Larry Poppins. How's that sound? And then my wife's like,
Maxwell is.
My wife's
Maxwell
like,
Poppins.
My wife's like, I don't know that that's a good idea to have a show about a guy babysitter around kids. I was like, oh yeah. But then I was like, what the irony is? Guys already did that better. But that's what the whole trans movement's about. The best women are men. The best women are men now. Dude. We're taking everything. So it's like, I guess we already do that. But no, what you should do is like. The more subtle a message, the more effective it could be, right? And like subtext matters, and so there should be messages, and there's entertainment with conservative values, right? But it doesn't need to beat you over the head. You should be entering spaces with characters and values that seem to identify with the left, and then having those gradual change to sort of show why conservative values are important. Like a show where maybe it starts off where you have a mother that's an OnlyFans person or something, and then there's a gradual shift to understanding what a terrible mistake that was. Now, I don't think that you should seek to have that message be the end-all, be-all. For me, as an artist, the primary goal should always be the art, to entertain the audience, whether you're a comedian, whether you're a painter, whether you whatever. But if you are trying to install your values, that's the way to go about it. And, I feel that you see the opposite. And by the way, there's been, there's a reason that anytime you have a war movie that wants to use assets that, like, there are members of the Pentagon and shit that sit in on the production of the movie and get to see the initial screening if they cooperated with the production of it. Because they understand the utility of propaganda. They understand that, like, oh, boy, Rambo 3, yeah, get everybody pumped for fighting those dirty Ruskies, so the shit does happen, but... Anyways, what do you want to talk about? I kind of
we got went off there, bro. I had a few things. I know you probably want to get back to your family.
Yeah, I got probably 10 minutes.
That's what you said to the last guy.
I know.
So
yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
New Top Gun movie. There you go. Yeah, Taylor M gets it. That was a good pro-America. Yeah.
I had a few things. So. Let's see. There was a few things I've thought about.
Your time's
so okay. Let's do this. Let's do what kind of do you follow a particular denomination for Christianity?
No, never have. So here is my I desperately wanted to believe in God and was a Christian when I was a teenager. It was like 13 or 14, but I was non-denominational. So my family went to a church in a little town called Middle Run that had a preacher for a while that I thought sucked. And then I think that church is now defunct. For years, what that church was it didn't have a preacher. And so they opened it up to people that weren't preachers.
Yeah, that's not a good idea.
Well, it actually wasn't bad in some senses. But anyways, here's what they do. You were a person that just felt deeply about a passage in the Bible and you wanted to talk to other people about it, you would come to our church. The church had probably 5 or 6 people is what we had. When I was about 14, I met a guy, it was sort of a happenstance thing, who was a youth pastor who was really big into professional wrestling. And this was at a time where, like, you had to pay money for the pay-per-views and stuff like that. And he had a lot of them probably illegally recorded on VHS. So he's like, hey, we're having this church thing. You want to come over? It's a pizza party. We'll watch, like, the new wrestling pay-per-view or whatever. So we went. He was a very cool guy. I enjoyed him. The church was Pentecostal. My youth pastor never dealt with any of the Pentecostal stuff, though. He was basically just like, look, being a Christian means following the word of Christ, try to be Christ-like, and that was basically, it's very surface level stuff. But as a 14-year-old, I was okay with that, right? He left. We got a new youth pastor, and they went all in on the Pentecostal shit, and that basically made me an atheist because I saw how insane this shit was to the point where, like, some of my experience with it. For those that don't know, Pentecostals like talk in tongues.
Dude, it's wild. They'll bring rattlesnakes sometimes if they're crazy enough and bite them.
I'll get to, so like at one point, what happened was they brought in a faith healer, and so all these old people that are like on walkers are walking up to the front of the church, and this guy's just smacking the shit out of them while everyone screams in tongues. And I don't know how old I am, but my brother's 2 years younger than me. And they're like, we're all going to lay hands on you and pray for you in tongues. And I was like, no, I'm good. And they did it to my brother. My brother's screaming and crying. And I go up like with all these adults, be like, let me take him away. And they're like, you don't understand. And they're yelling at me. And the one lady
my
in the
brother
church
is crying.
The one lady in the church like comes up to me in a hallway and says, your problem is you're too smart for this. And that was the beginning of the end. Now my dad instilled a value in me that I think is very important, which is that if you benefit from an organization for something, then you try to stick it out there come hell or high water. So if you join a football team, even if you're not having fun, those people on that team are counting on you. You made a commitment. And with this church, we had this big fundraiser. We raised all this money in Ocean City, a big church event that was coming up. We were so excited. And I had got fed up with the church, and my dad said, if you go on that trip, if you allow them to spend money on you, then you're continuing to go to that church because you're not going to go get all this money and then say, see you later. So I went on the trip, and then I got stuck at the church. The ultimate time where it ended, I'm not making this up. This is an absolute true story. I was asking questions about our youth pastor, and he was talking, and he started to talk about how he had the ability to handle snakes. And I said, that's crazy. As like a 14-year-old, I was like, that's crazy. And he looks me dead in the eyes and said, I could take a shotgun and I could load it, put it in my mouth and pull the trigger, and God wouldn't leave it go off. And I said, I own a shotgun. It's only about 5 minutes away from here. Would you like me to go get it? He said, go ahead. So I went home and my dad was there. I was like, Dad, can I have your gun? He's like, why? I was like, because our youth pastor is going to load it and put it in his mouth and pull the trigger. And he says that God will prevent it. And my dad said, you don't have to go back to that church anymore. Dude. So that's how my time ended in that church. That is an honest to goodness story that actually happened. It was, and for me, I became very jaded with Christianity then because I thought that's what Christianity was. And I was appalled by that. And so then I became very arrogant atheist. As I didn't think about it for a lot. I desperately needed to believe, but I didn't anymore. And then I would still go to church with my parents, but I just didn't really believe. It was more just a social gathering, etc. Ultimately, that was a large portion of my life, probably up until around the point that I met my wife. And ultimately, you started to see a little humility in yourself to understand that you don't know all the answers, that there's more important things out there, and ultimately seeing people not preaching to me, not telling me how to live my life, but people whose lives I thought were lives that I should model, that were good family people, that were raising children, that were good husbands or good wives, and understanding how they got there through Christianity is ultimately what brought me back to being a Christian. But I don't go to church. I haven't attended like a church service other than just my wife's family's Catholic. I've gone to a ceremony here and there with them, but ultimately I consider myself non-denominational then.
Okay, that's a wild story.
Yeah, it's true. That it was crazy. That church was absolutely insane. I'm obviously not going to say the name of the church or the people involved, but it was.
Well, I won't ask.
It really was like you could see the influence of ego, personality being more important than the message of God. Like you could see it in real time. And as an impressionable kid, they have no idea the damage they did to someone like me because to me, being that was all I knew. That's what Christianity was to me, you know, and there were so many little things, and I had questions, right? I understand the concept of faith and how important faith is, but as a 14-year-old, I have questions. Like, here was a question that I got yelled at for asking. They told us that the act of getting angry itself is a sin. Not acting on the anger, but you hear something that makes you angry. You've sinned because you thought anger. I said, okay, but we agree that Christ never sinned, right? Correct.
Christ got angry multiple times.
Yeah. I was like, what about when he's flipping the money changers table? Isn't that him angry? And they said, well, no. And I
Christ wasn't angry.
I said, well,
it was righteous indignation.
Well, and they said, well, the reason that that's not a sin is because it was Christ. And I'm like, but so if you say, but then it's not a characteristic to be admirable. If you say if I were to say, my definition of sin includes the argument that Rob Noor could never sin. Then I'm out there stealing and murdering and kicking people and all this shit. And I say, but I'm such a great guy. I've never sinned. And you say, yeah, look at all the sin. And I say, no, you forget. Read the fine print. Sin can never include Rob Noor. So I've never sinned. You would say, okay, you could make that semantic argument. But why is that something to be applauded? It's just bullshit. It's a word trick. And I was like, surely there's more to Jesus than that. That it's just, sure, he did all the stupid shit that the rest of us do that's sin, but we just don't consider it sin. And now, of course, I know that no, that's an incorrect reading. Jesus didn't sin, right? And the idea that him having righteous anger at them for that wasn't a sin in itself. But these were people that weren't equipped to deal with these questions, so they would just tell me, like, shut up, don't think about this stuff.
I think if you can't answer those questions, you shouldn't be in a position where you...
I agree. Or if you are, because I do understand there are probably some churches that are desperate to have people particularly working with kids and like youth groups and stuff like that. Maybe the best thing to say is like, that's a good question. Let me point you in the direction of someone that might be able to help you answer that. Instead of just being like, shut up, you're wrong. Right?
That's a major flaw Christianity has right now, is not wanting people to ask questions when you desperately need people to ask questions to affirm their faith.
I think that that's the religious people that I look up them the most. I think they don't shy away from questions. In fact, they relish that, right? Because it's not like they're trying to sell you a bill of goods that they don't believe. They truly believe it. So they're happy to talk to you, and they're happy to answer questions. That doesn't mean that we're all humans, we're all fallible. But, that's sort of where my initial... I should go to church more. I think we're going to start going to Catholic church more. Hank's going to get baptized. We're sending him to a Catholic school, which is the only private school really around here. So he will go there. Unfortunately, they only offer school up to 6th grade. So at 7th grade, then he's probably going to be going to a public school. But that's it. That's my religion.
Okay. I'm more wondering, just because of some of the theology I've seen you talk about, I would imagine you don't equate religious laws and rules with any kind of secular thing. Like, is there any of the commandments, aside from things like murder, where you think there should be some legal stuff attached to?
Theft, right?
Well, I mean, yeah, but things that affect other people in a major way. Is that like kind of your line?
It's things that are, for me, it would be things that are a direct imposition on other people, a direct act of aggression against other people. So it'd be sort of similar to the non-aggression principle of the libertarians, though not as extreme as them. So let me give you an example. I don't think that you making a bad choice in a way that's not like directly physically violent or stealing someone's material, etc., should be punishable by law. I feel that it is immoral and a sin to cheat on your loved one, to cheat on your spouse.
Right.
Do you think it should be a crime? No, I don't think it should be a crime, because the crime of you punching someone, that is you using physical aggression, the direct impact of that is to the detriment of another person, right? The crime of you making a decision to like someone else, that hurts that person's feeling and dissolves sort of the trust in that marriage. But that's not direct in the same sense, so I don't feel that it should be punishable by law. And, that's sort of... I think that even people, like, I guess I don't know a lot of people that are in more stringent religious faiths, but you're probably familiar with the Crucible and Andrew Wilson and that crew. As a Christian nationalist who's Orthodox, he doesn't believe that all sin should be a crime. Like, he doesn't even believe that homosexuality should be a crime. He believes that we should not have gay marriage. He believes a bunch of other stuff that I think goes too far.
I mean, I think there actually are arguments against gay marriage, mostly related in what does society want to promote.
Yeah, but of course, but that's but the point. The reason I bring that up is even many people that are against gay marriage would stop before saying being gay should be illegal, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right. So, if I could steelman that argument, that would be, well, the difference is this: one has to do with the active promotion of a type of lifestyle, which we're under no obligation to do as a government, but one has to do with outlawing a behavior. And we will say, even though we think that we should frown upon being gay, that it shouldn't be outlawed, right?
I mean, it's similar to your anger point where having homosexual feelings are not the problem. It's when you deviate into sexual behavior that the sin arises.
That could be, right? That was, again, I'm no scholar on this, but that seems like it intuitively makes sense. But again, my point is, that to go further than that, is that the sin, just because it's a sin, morality and legality have some sort of correlation, but by no means are they directly applicable.
They're not attached at the hip, they're holding hands.
Correct. And so we could say it is a sin to murder. It makes sense that it's illegal to murder, but there's all sorts of things. Lying's a sin. Should we criminalize that? Of course not. What would that look like?
We do in certain circumstances.
Well,
right?
but not.
It just depends on the context.
Right, but we do it in context where there's more to just lying, like libel or slander, right? But that's because there's actionable, right? Like just lying. If all sin was illegal and everyone sins, who's running the jails? Right?
I'll do it.
You sin too. You're going to be in jail.
No, I never sin. Don't say that.
Right? And so, like, it's some point you have to say, you literally can't have a functioning society if you say, anyway. And then, like, the caller that called in earlier, he was going further. Sin should be capital punishment.
Bruh, you need this in your toolbox for the next time because you did not bring this up once, and it's like the easiest system still. So the Old Testament commandments do still apply to us, but the punishments labeled in the Jewish code do not.
Yeah, well, that's sort of what I said.
Still a sin to.
I mean, I didn't say it in that
that's a succinct
clear
way to say
right.
it.
But that's why I say if he says that adulterers should be stoned or people that have sex pre-wedlock should be stoned, and that it's basically a sin to not carry that out, and Jesus is without sin, and Jesus washed the feet of prostitutes. I mean, it's pretty easy.
I was really confused. I don't see any reading of the text where Jesus just decides, well, the other lover's not here, so I won't.
Yeah, it all sounds like
I don't understand that reading.
Right.
I really don't.
Now, again, I will fully admit that I would guess that probably 80% of my audience has a far greater reading and understanding of the Bible than me. I think that I'm a bad Christian. I think that I pick and choose, right? It's true.
Well, do you want to know something really controversial? Is the Trinity, as taught by a lot of churches, is not actually biblical, and all the stuff people use for it is inferences based on the text. There's not any like direct statement. So it's things like, because the gospel is God and Jesus is the gospel, Jesus and God are the same thing, right? Mm-hmm. So it's degrees of change like that. Whereas in reality, what the text was probably saying, at least in my opinion, and people will disagree with me, and that's totally fine. I think we're saying God and Jesus both have this word, or the gospel, which is their key for our happiness to return to them. And they both are united in a purpose to return us. They're not literally the same being, metamorphosing into different bodies and whatnot. But
maybe
they're one in purpose.
I've heard.
So there's like
I can't weigh in.
Like
I really
readings.
Can't. I will want to say to Cyber Muppet here. He says, "I disagree with Rob that a society without sin is not possible. I think it's unrealistic by virtue of people who love their hedonistic lifestyle, but it's possible." I disagree. Again, I'm no biblical scholar, but in all of history, there's only been one person without sin. Correct?
Yeah.
So I don't even think it's. I think the entire covenant with God, with Jesus, is that we will all sin. We're born into sin. And the way to God is through the fact that his son died on the cross for us.
Well, I'll say this to Taylor because they're saying it's not true. It's a simplistic take. I was saying it's not true because it's not what I believe. I mean, Obviously it's debated, but all of the references to traditional Trinity theology, as we know now, start arising when Greek Gnosticism enters the church philosophy. Greek Gnosticism says that God can't have a physical body because all mass is inherently corrupt and corruptible. And so God can't be perfect if he has any part of mass, and so he had to separate his essence as Jesus or something to come to the earth, and then remove that essence and go back to being God, and then he's also the Holy Ghost. But this all arises out of the Gnostic introduction into Christian theology, where we have to find this workaround where God can be not having a body, but also have a body, but also be the same thing, because we can't believe that he has any part of matter in his thing, because matter, like bodies, are corrupt.
I can't comment on any of this. I really can't. I was taught that
I'm not expecting you to be able to.
I was taught, my understanding, the way I was taught at both the Pentecostal church and sort of the other church that I went to was that there are three separate entities that sort of work as one, which is the Holy Spirit, Christ, and God. And that's what I was told, that the Trinity was real.
No, conceptual. Denying the Trinity does not make you not a Christian. It's just objectively not. It's not objectively taught by Christ or anywhere in the Bible. It all comes from scholars in the 1st century AD and forward, with Gnosticism getting introduced, and using that belief to justify it. Like, there were a ton of Christians prior to the 1st century who did not believe in Trinitarianism. There were a ton in the first couple centuries after that who didn't. It was when the Catholic Church and Justinian officially announced that Trinitarianism was the doctrine of Christianity by one vote in the Nicene Council that it became taught everywhere.
So let me just say, because obviously, I know you're having a conversation with people in the chat.
Sorry,
here,
I
do have to get going
at
at some point.
Yeah.
But that's no, I don't mind it. But I'll just say this, and then I got to get going. Why should me, as someone who's like sort of not heavily invested in this or to have a strong point in this, why should I care? What's the difference if I do believe in the Trinity or I don't? What's the real world application of what that means?
I mean, for me, it doesn't. For my theology, it doesn't matter if you believe in the Trinity. But a lot of Christians do say, well, if you don't believe in the Trinity, you are not a Christian. You can follow all of Christ's commandments, you can follow all his other teachings, but if you don't believe in the 1st century scholars in the Nicene Council and Justinian, the emperor of the Byzantines, then you're not a Christian.
So there wouldn't be implications. There wouldn't be implications to the effect of like what that means as far as practically how society should be formed.
There was one bishop that swung his vote in the Nicene Council.
So, all right. So I get it. So
sorry,
it's all right. It's all right. But no, I appreciate the call. I do have to get going, but I'm glad that you called in. I thought it was a good call. And yeah, hopefully you call in. We try to do these every Friday. So
yeah, I'll appear if I can. It's always fun chatting with you.
Thank you, man. Take it easy. All right, that's going to be it for the show. I hope the vertical stream went well. I have no idea how many people watch. You're missing out if you're not on the horizontal stream. You can see everyone's chat, and callers can interact and yell with the chat about things like the Trinity that I have almost no idea about. I will say, to finish out what Cyber Buppet says, it's impossible to have a society of people who haven't sinned, but it is possible to have a society of people that no longer sin. I disagree. Technically, you're right. For example, we could build a society with just vegetative 90-year-olds or just children, and we'd say that's society, and they won't sin anymore because they have a day left to live. But all of us will sin. All of us. I sin every day. I do not think it's possible, and certainly if that society would be a society that you expect to make through generations, sin is inevitable. There will never be a person again without sin, in my estimation. I don't think it's possible to have thousands, if not millions, of people living in a society where no one ever sins in the entirety of the society. That's my belief. But, so, all right. Thank you all so much. I enjoyed this show immensely. I hope you all did as well. I'm probably not going to be streaming again until maybe Monday or Tuesday, but I wouldn't be surprised if I don't. For those that don't know, I do home health care is my job. I work half the week with a person with people with developmental disabilities. Sometimes I get to clock out. I have to stay there. I get to clock out, and I'm able to stream to YouTube exclusively. But a lot of times, especially around the holidays, there's not going to be a lot of downtime for me at work. So it kind of gets crazy around the holidays. So I'll probably be working a lot, so I can't guarantee that I'll be streaming Monday. I am going to try to put some more short form content up on YouTube, whether it be shorts or just regular videos, so check out for that. And I'll definitely be trying to stream next Thursday, the day after Christmas, so that might be the next time you see me. But just check out. Hopefully I'll be out there. And there's a lot of backlog content. Go watch all my debates. Fun. Watch that debate last night with the OnlyFans chick if you're bored. It was a lot of fun. So, all right, thank you so much, everyone. I look forward to seeing you all. If I don't see you before Christmas, have a Merry Christmas. Thank you for helping make my life and my family's life and so much more entertaining. It really does help me a lot how much support that I get from people. Thank you for the financial donations. Excuse me. Keep having the hiccups here. And yeah, horizontal stream for the win. You're right, Mr. Name. So I really appreciate you all. So thanks so much. And as always, have a good one.